So I guess I'll just get into it. This is kind of a long-winded topic for today. I did a decent amount of research. This is about as much research as I would do if I was to do like a video essay on a topic, or at least this much. It was really just a cursory glance. Um, we're gonna try something a little special. We're talking about some current event stuff. There's a lot of current event stuff we could be talking about, but especially because we exist on the internet and the internet is our home, we want to talk about what is happening online, and it has to do with queer youth, but it has to do with queer people in general, especially trans people. See you, Kraken. Yeah, I would say that if this is gonna be heavy for you, feel free to you know, take care of your mental health. If you want to mute until after I'm done with this topic, or if you just want to head out just in general because it's triggering. The trigger warnings are in the title. Yeah, this is this is a big deal. The LGBTQ youth suicide prevention group leaves Ets after TikTok and hate and vitriol. The Trevor Project, which has nearly 35,000 followers on the platform, said LGBTQ young people are regularly victimized on Ets, formerly known as Twitter. The Trevor Project, a national suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ youth, announces leaving X, formerly known as Twitter, because of increasing hate and vitriol on the platform targeting the LGBTQ community. The decision comes just over a year after billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk finalizes his $44 billion purchase of the company. LGBTQ youth people are regularly victimized at the expense of their mental health, and X's removal of certain moderation functions makes it more difficult for us to create a welcoming space for them on this platform, the organization wrote in a tweet Thursday. The Trevor Project, which has nearly 35,000 followers on X, said the decision to leave was made with input from dozens of internal and external perspectives. In particular, the group wrote, "We question whether leaving the platform would allow harmful narratives and rhetoric to prevail with one less voice to challenge them. But in the end, the group decided that leaving was the right thing to do." The Trevor Project has made a decision to close its account on X. Please read the full statement here. The Trevor Project has made the decision to close the account on X given the increasing hate and volition on this platform targeting the LGBTQ community. The group we exist to serve, the LGBTQ youth people, are regularly victimized at the expense of their mental health, and as removal of certain moderation functions makes it more difficult for us to create a welcoming space for them on the platform. Okay, we read this apart. Upon deep analysis, we've concluded that suspending our account is the right thing to do. For LGBTQ young people looking for a safe space to connect with one another, TrevorSpace.org is our own social networking site designed specifically for ages 13 to 24. If you would like to keep up with our work supporting the LGBTQ youth people, we invite you to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. No online space is perfect, but having access to sufficient moderation capabilities is essential to maintaining a safer space for our community. So we noticed this a couple of days ago. It's making the rounds, and people were talking about it on even Blue Sky as well, because it's kind of a big deal. The Trevor Project is probably one of the most visible LGBTQ advocacy organizations that exists, especially like out of the United States. We've used their crisis hotline before. They will not turn you away calling their crisis hotline necessarily if you're older than 24, but they try to serve people 13 to 24. We have physically aged out of their target demographic for help. There are other organizations, but I think the further we get into the current timeline, the more obvious it is that LGBTQ youth need to be safeguarded and protected because they're under attack. We are all under attack, and it starts at the bottom. They're trying to get at the root. That is to say, people trying to eradicate LGBTQ people, or at the very least, suppress our rights, even more so than has already happened. This is actually part of the wider topic for today, and we'll get through it in a second. Hey, Erilyn. Good morning. Hope you're ready for some triggering content. I don't walk away on issues. I feel you. Not everyone's as resilient as you, Dell. I I struggle myself with folks who generally like I don't engage in politics in the sense that like when you generalize it like that, it's like okay, like bipartisan politics is one thing. Being like, I don't like the way, like politics like galvanizes people to treat each other badly. I don't like how it feels like, a yelling match a lot of the time, people ignoring people, or like anything about the climate of the world and how like political pundits and like very political people, quote unquote, like myself, can sometimes alienate those people and make them feel really weird. And politics is very much feels like an adult thing, which is actually kind of funny because being a baby fur and wanting those types of people to follow us, it is like a balancing act because a lot of people like in the gaming community and baby fur community and furry fandom and fandoms in general, a lot of people are trying to get into escapism. A lot of people are trying to avoid the things they're like, fucked up, right? So I can empathize with the desire to disengage from those things that make you feel sad, especially if you feel like you have no control. However, especially because like the rights my rights intersectionally are being attacked as well as the rights of people I care about. Because I have a platform, I feel like I do have a responsibility to speak to that, especially, I have anarchists in my tags and stuff. Like, I want to talk about this stuff. It's always been part of our content to talk about political issues. Sometimes we go a long time without talking about political issues. And there's plenty of stuff that we still haven't talked about and may talk about in the future, even though it's not necessarily as topical anymore. But like we definitely pay attention to stuff that happens in the world, and we do feel a little bit disgruntled when we see people just like turning a blind eye. But too much of anything can be a bad thing, and you can definitely be poisoned by seeing like everything bad that's happening in the world and like just kind of shutting down and being like climate doomerism, for example. um and we all have different levels of relative privilege, especially if you have the support from people in your life to be hikikomori like us, and like not have to go outside a lot if you don't want to. But that's sort of a protection measure, um and that sucks. Though I will say that people who want to disengage from politics are often people who like have a degree of like safety, be it being straight, being cis, being white, being like upper middle class, if that even exists anymore, and that sort of stuff. But I will also say that like in response to your I don't walk away from issues, I would say that it's important to like know your limits and stuff. Like if you're having a bad day and you know it's gonna like fuck with you, like scrolling on shit, even like the CNN website could like trigger something and put you in a bad mood all day. Like being able to manage your mental health while still staying informed is really hard. And sometimes you do need to step away, I would say, even us. Good morning, Wamazi. It's not resilience. I just don't walk out of shit situation whether it's good or not for me. That sounds a little bit self-flagellatory. I mean, why stay in a situation that harms you, right? But uh, I'm not exactly I'm not exactly a person who finds it easy to say to do what I just said or what I just suggested. I like to stick things out if I can. And yeah, again, if anyone feels like this sort of topic is a little bit too much for them, like feel free to bounce. In like an hour or two, we'll be playing video games. At the end of its message, the organization directed LGBTQ people to trevorspace.org, its own social networking space for queer teens and young adults. The Trevor Project also noted that it will continue to maintain its presence on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Ets's press office did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the Trevor Project's departure or its characterization of hate and vitriol on the platform. As NBC News reported last month, on the one-year anniversary of Musk's acquisition of Twitter, many LGBTQ people say the once hospitable home for community building has turned toxic. This, they say, is due to the part of a number of policy changes and business decisions at the company, including the layoff of employees who worked on reducing misinformation and harassment on the platform, and the removal of the site's previous ban on intentionally using the incorrect pronouns or names of transgender people. Practices known as misgendering and dead naming. GLAAD and GLAAD, an LGBTQ media advocacy group, releases an annual social media safety index and platform scorecard that evaluates social media platforms' policies for ensuring the safety of LGBTQ users. In its most recent scorecard, published in June, X ranked in the last place among the major social media platforms. Since Musk took over the platform, LGBTQ people running some of the most followed X accounts have abandoned it. Elton John, who has over 1 million followers, announced that he was leaving in December, and Ellen DeGeneres, who has 75 million followers, hasn't tweeted since April. The Trevor Project is not the only LGBTQ nonprofit to leave. The San Francisco LGBT Center, LGBTQ Youth Scotland, and the UK-based Mermaids, a transgender charity, also has left the platform, just to name a few. This is a big deal. This is only a backdrop for the actual topic of the day. The topic of the day is not Ets, actually. But to contextualize the online space that we're in right now with LGBTQ hate, and based on the reaction of some folks in chat, and I'm sure people who will watch this when it's a VOD, obviously, if you're queer, you've been seeing the writing on the wall. Even if you try not to engage very much with politics, you probably know someone who has been affected by anti-trans laws, whether or not they're young or old. Because although there is a lot of attention on LGBTQ youth right now, there is just general attacks on minorities, especially trans people. And trans adults. Maybe you've heard about the trans bans in Florida. There's a bunch of stuff attacking trans people in sports. Literally, we posted an article yesterday in our Discord talking about how not only now are trans women not allowed to compete in women's chess tournaments, they're also not allowed to play pool. With the cue balls and stuff. Somehow there's some advantage there. Total bullshit. But, there is a concerted effort to push LGBTQ people, and especially trans people, out of public life. And it's really, really depressing. And it makes sense because, talking about that, I believe it was a senator who said he wanted to eradicate transgenderism from public life, and I was like, no, I'm not championing genocide or anything. What? Because he doesn't believe trans people are actually trans people, as a semantics thing. The attack on LGBTQ youth is a concerted effort in the sense that if less people have access to information about being queer, how the Don't Say Gay bill exists to make it so it takes a long time for someone to learn about queer identity or queer history, or even have teachers that can publicly talk about the fact that they might be married to someone of the same gender, for example. This is a way to make it so people take longer and longer to know what trans is, to figure out who they are, and to take longer to be able to transition. That's also why puberty blockers have been a big thing and been under attack. It's been talked about a lot. I won't belabor the point there, But I will say that it's hard not to feel like bigots are winning right now. And in the wider attack on like marginalized people's rights, bad stuff still goes on, and we still have to worry about like workers' rights, unhoused people, lack of health care in this country. Like there's things that just stack and stack and stack and stack and stack. Not to mention abortion bans, and just kind of a domino effect of rolling back civil rights in general, and scapegoating trans people. So, with all of that background, I want you to understand that the topic of today is actually about a bill that has passed sort of through the Senate, but has been like suspended, I believe. Though I pulled up a number of articles, so I don't have to just go off the cuff and say what I know off the top of my head about it, because we have lots of stuff to cover. This article that I just read to you was published on November 9th, which was like, what, 5 days ago? Right? But let's turn back the clock to July 18th, 2022. And this seems ancillarily related as well. But I also want to give a little bit more background to why KOSA is a thing. Omugle lawsuit update. CA Goldberg Section 230 case prevails on product liability claims. Omugle lawsuit update. Groundbreaking CA Goldberg Section 230 case prevails on product liability claims. Last week, the Oregon District Court issued its decision that our case, AM versus Omugle, will advance on all four of its product liability claims, overcome Omugle's argument for Section 230 immunity. This is massive progress on Section 230 liability for dangerous tech products. The product. Omugle is a website founded in 2009 that randomly pairs strangers for video chats. It markets itself to children. The platform's common use is for strangers to engage in online sets with one another. The design of the platform, the anonymity of users, and lack of age inquiries or verifications makes it inevitable that children and adults will match. Consequently, the platform is a magnet for child predators. Lawsuit. AM versus Omugle.com LLC. According to our lawsuit filed on November 2021, this is a product liability case against a company whose product procures children for sexual predators. True to its design, Omugle matched our then 11-year-old client with a near 40-year-old pedophile who abused her for years. Our lawsuit claimed that Omugle is defective and negligent in both its design and warnings. The lawsuit points to the fact that Omugle has continued to be the subject of investigation from cybercrime experts and law enforcement officers all over the world, yet has taken no known action to mitigate the frequent occurrences of child exploitation on their platform. Indeed, they tout the dangers of their product on their own web homepage. The decision we received this week denied Omugle's motion to dismiss the basis of Section 230, though it was originally designed to deal with defamation lawsuits involving online bulletin boards. Over the last 23 years, tech companies have twisted Section 230 to shield into a shield that protects them from any responsibility for dangerous practices. Consequently, 230 has the opposite effect it was supposed to have. Instead of incentivizing tech companies to behave responsibly, it carved out an exception for certain types of companies to exempt them from the laws the rest of us have to follow. Omugle argues it should be entitled to immunity. I disagree. Michael M. Mossman, Senior United States District Judge of Oregon District Court, where the case was filed. Judge Mossman agreed that what matters for the purposes of those claims is that the warnings or design of the product at issue lead to an interaction between an 11-year-old girl and a sexual predator in their late 30s. As Naomi Leeds wrote in our motion, the Judge Mossman quoted in this decision, the random pairing function of adults and children and the service accessibility to both adults and children work in tandem. Plaintiff's claims, thus, are nothing to do with the information provided by the user. It is a website's sole function of randomly matching children and adults that causes this danger. This function occurs before content occurs. So, it doesn't go on for too much longer, so I will finish this out. What's next? This is far from over. We're now waiting to hear on the second motion to dismiss. Omegle is arguing this product is not their product is not a product. We will be engaging, arguing against that in August. Watch this space. We're confident we will overcome the product issue as we did Section 230, but our case against Omegle is a reminder of why legislation modifying 230 cannot apply only to large internet companies. Omegle doesn't touch Meta in size, but the product is about as harmful as it gets. Live streaming and video chatting for sets that matches children with adults. Remember, the harms are not a bug, they're a feature. So, why am I talking about this? So, if you don't know what KOSA is, it's the Kids Online Safety Act. And it's actually been talked about since at least the summer in circles that we know. Someone in our Discord server actually made us aware of it. And I don't know if the people who originally wrote up KOSA were responding to this specific thing. But between stuff like this and even like the stuff that YouTube had to do a couple of years ago, like every video that we post on YouTube, regardless of how short it is, we have to explicitly say that our content is not for children. And that was to help protect children, and content for children isn't supposed to have targeted ads, and the comments are disabled. It's to like protect kids from predators and like toxic shit, right? And I wanted to show a like pretty clear example of why something like KOSA is needed, despite the fact that I am about to spend like the next hour arguing against its use in its current form at the very least, because there's bad actors in the works. And just like a lot of times in American politics, the fact that there's like this reach across the aisle moment is actually bad, because not only do you have to fight against Republicans about this right now, you also have to convince Democrats that this is worth changing or fighting against or pushing back against. And it's not as though that there shouldn't be safeguards for kids online. Quite the opposite. However, how that affects adults and how it could be weaponized to suppress queerness and make it even harder for queer kids to find out about themselves is something of immediate concern. So, July 2023. Children Online Safety Bill clears Senate hurdle despite strong civil liberties pushback. Critics say the bill will make the internet less safe for kids by increasing digital surveillance and reducing access to encrypted services. Which is another layer to this, right? Because on one hand, like, making sure there's not targeted advertising on people who are like, you know, being really malleable because of their age and being affected by the internet, and, you know, just how much the internet can fuck you up. Like, I know plenty of people who, like, grew up on the internet, and they have positive things to say about it, but they also generally admit, I saw things that I shouldn't have seen. Myself included, honestly. And I don't think everything necessarily needs guardrails, but, like, it is certainly, there's certainly multifaceted issues, not just child predators, but also companies selling data and, you know, railroading kids into like certain forms of consumption. In the gaming sphere, people talk about how some kid might use their mom's credit card and buy a bunch of fucking loot boxes in FIFA, and, you know, ruin their family's finances, and they can't get a refund because that's not how the gachas work, and fuck you. But like, even with something like that, people like myself with like ADHD or autism or BPD or anything that could have an effect on like decision making, especially with like time limits and impulsivity, those same mechanisms that can exploit children materially and financial ways can also affect disabled people. So like it is interesting that that right now we're in a phase of like internet legislation that's focusing on protecting children specifically, while doing the whole neoliberalism thing and pretending that capitalism isn't a lot to blame for the lot of damage that is done to people online regardless of age. I'm also not a big fan of surveillance, which is one of the first red flags I saw when I first started hearing about KOSA, because I was just like, I don't want to share my personal information with every social media site. I don't want them to know. I don't want them to necessarily know where I live. Although obviously, if you have the right information, you can definitely IP addresses and stuff. And a lot of people aren't safe, and you're only as safe as your the weakest link in your chain. And there's so much other shit, right? But like the concept of perhaps having to share like my ID with somewhere like Twitter sounds disgusting, and no, please God, no. Which was what people were talking about before, but apparently that's not gonna be the case, though there is obviously still cause for concern. The Senate Commerce Committee on Thursday advanced a pair of children's privacy and safety bills that have attached a storm of criticism from civil liberties groups that say the bills will do more harm than good for kids on the internet. The Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, introduced by Senator Edward McClaney, Democrat in Massachusetts, and Bill Cassidy, Republican in I don't know what state LA is, would update the 1998 Children's Online Privacy Act to raise the age of consent for data collection to 16 and build a new Federal Trade Commission division to enforce it. The Kids Online Safety Act, introduced by Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat in Connecticut, and Marsha Blackhorn, Tennessee Republican, would place a duty of care on platforms to prevent promoting to users under 17 content that includes harmful behaviors such as eating disorders and suicide. The bill carves out explicit protection for support services such as suicide help hotlines, schools, and educational software. An amendment to the bill approved Thursday will also require companies to be transparent about if they're filtering content using an algorithm and giving users a chance to opt out. This sounds good. People have literally talked about how the way social media is built, it drives engagement in a way that can have a negative effect on like young people in general. Critics say bills could make the internet less safe for children by censoring content that could help them and giving parents tools to surveil children in unsafe home environments. Yes. The bill just assumes that what's good for some kids is good for all kids, and Anelia Bethia, policy analyst for the Center for Democracy and Technology's Free Expanse team. Both the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act 2.0, known as COPPA 2.0, I thought it started with a K. Well, let's keep going. The Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA. Those are two different things. The Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act 2.0, known as COPPA 2.0, and the Kids Online Safety Act also passed out of committee last summer, but did not receive a floor vote. Neither bill has a companion in the House, which is yet to reintroduce comprehensive privacy legislation that passed out of committee last year. Protecting kids online remains a top priority, and comprehensive privacy legislation for one national standard is the best way to start, a House Energy and Commerce spokesperson told Cyberscoop. While the odds for the bill making it to the president's desk are slim, they have his support. President Biden backed the legislation during the address on mental health on Tuesday, urging the Senate to pass it. Bop it. Biden previously called for legislation protecting children online in his State of the Union address. The bills have garnered the support of a number of children's safety groups, including Fair Play, Design It For Us, and Common Sense Media. Taken together, KOSA and COPPA will help create the internet all young people deserve, one that respects their privacy and autonomy and allows them to safely learn, play, and connect. Josh, Golan, executive director of Fair Play, said in a statement, "We look forward to working with members of both parties and both chambers in the fall to see this critical legislation to the finish line. Children and families simply can't wait for Congress any longer." There's also attracted heavy criticism from civil liberties and privacy advocacy groups that have concerns that laws may facilitate practices that harm children. Specifically, they say changes made to the bill since the last time it passed out of committee never fully addressed their concerns. Specifically, critics say that the Kids Online Safety Act has a very broad duty of care on platforms to moderate content that can harm children. This can incentivize platforms to make a zero-tolerance policy and potentially moderate non-harmful content in the process. But Hithia explained. She said that the part of the problem is that platforms use content moderation tools that have difficulty parsing precise meaning. So for instance, platforms may take down content that is educational about eating disorders alongside content promoting them. Yes, that is very true. Like, you know, people had eating disorders before the internet. Like, sometimes you're gonna need help. We were lucky that we had a school library when we were like, I don't know, 14, 15, that like had books about mental health. Because we weren't as good about finding stuff on the internet that was like educational. And finding a book about depression really helped us understand depression and mental health and like what we were going through. And now it's just a much more complex world, and it's good to understand like different perspectives and even testimonials from people who have struggled with it, which could totally be filtered because talking about your experience with a mental health disorder might just get flagged as promoting that thing. Happens all the time on plenty of platforms when you want to be anti-fascist, and because they detect the word fascist, they go, well, we need to moderate this. While actual fascism doesn't usually get touched, or is even amplified, like on X. The way people speak is so sophisticated, and the way these tools work is not. The other primary concern with KOSA is that it will be politicized by the state attorney general, who the bill gives power to enforce the duty of care, leading to the takedown of LGBTQ and reproductive health content in states where that information is already being censored in schools and in other ways. Some supporters of the bill have embraced the potential. For instance, the Heritage Foundation has expressed support for using the bill to limit kids' access to sexual and transgender content. So this is one of the parts that more recently has made us really concerned about this issue. And it's like, you want to make it so people younger people have a hard time like connecting with transgender content and educational content, and there's plenty of kid-friendly queer content on the internet, but the right is making a concerted effort to paint it all as indoctrination and grooming. They're not even saying the quiet part out loud anymore. Critics say that KOSA's adoption of a broader standard of knowledge, similar to that of the controversial Earn It Act, also raises concerns about potentially undermining encryption by making companies more liable for knowing that users may use the technology for illicit behaviors. The pair of bills has also attracted scrutiny for how they may incentivize the use of age verification technologies, which have become the center of civil liberties concerns amidst the widespread push of social media and adult content companies to verify users' ages. I don't know if people have noticed, but there's a lot of websites where you need to have an account to look at explicit content, be it DeviantArt, Pixiv, not technically Twitter, but I've had the thing of like, if I'm using the browser I'm using right now that doesn't have my login for Twitter saved, I can't really look at any Twitter stuff. But that's a separate thing, because Elon Musk just wants as many people on Twitter as possible that he likes. COPPA 2.0, which raises the age of protection of the law to 16, can also lead to companies needing to more proactively verify how old users are. Current COPPA standards apply to websites directed at children, but including teens implies a new range of services. It's hard to just raise the age of COPPA because it's hard to think of a website that is directed to teens that isn't also directed to adults, says Bailey Sanchez, senior counsel with the Youth and Education Privacy Team at the Future Privacy Forum. There is an affirmative duty to apply protections to teens. You need to get into the business of sorting out who is a teen and who is an adult, and who is an adult. That's like, in order to protect minors, you have to suss out which folks are minors, and how technology is used to ascertain that information is important, or how much loss of privacy happens. I mean, I think that even folks in, like, say the kink sphere, for example, or adult artists on places like Twitter, for example, are like, you know, big bowlers. Minors don't interact, but minors will interact anyway, and someone can literally just lie about their age. I know that there's Discord servers out there that require an ID to enter their server. I feel uncomfortable with that personally. I have certainly like, you know, blacked out parts of my ID and sent it to servers, and I appreciate the due diligence, but at the same time, I don't like showing people my ID. And it's just so, it feels so icky, and it's like sacrificing privacy for that protection for young people, but then it's like, is it really gonna protect young people like they say it is? And is it really just gonna be used to control young people and surveil them more? A lot of people in the queer community, and a lot of people who say maybe have like childhood abuse, especially parental childhood abuse, have been talking about how there's gonna be a whole generation of kids that aren't talking to their parents when they get old enough to get out of the house, because they basically have to hold in all that trauma, and that was gonna happen regardless, because of the social climate we live in right now, and how parental rights are basically stamping over, like, you know, the rights of, like, children. And we talked about that before, how children are, like, kind of legally property, kind of like a pet plus in a way, how socially it has been and still is kind of contentious depending on what community you're talking about like hitting your kids and, like, you know, that sort of thing, and what you're allowed to do to punish your kids. Let alone how a lot of people, you know, try to make their kids into little versions of themselves. Even outside of, like, queer stuff, people being like, oh, these vaccines cause autism in my kid, are another way to control, like, kids' bodies and stuff. And it's disgusting, and I hate it. I'm back. I've done the ID. I feel you there. I, as a kid, had my parents always try to use parental apps. I feel like because of our age and, like, at the time, like, our parents could definitely, like, use email and stuff, but it was a little bit beyond them to do parental controls, and we were really lucky for that, because if they were, like, technologically, like, in the know enough to do it, I'm pretty sure they would have. But they were pretty lenient with stuff. The only thing that I wasn't allowed to play as a kid, for example, game-wise, was Grand Theft Auto. And it's not even that I wasn't allowed to play it. They say if you can find the money that's not my money to buy it, you can. I just won't buy it for you, because I'm not buying a game that has a name of a crime. That's the name of the crime. I don't know exactly what they thought about us looking at sexual content, but only one of, like, our aunts had ever saw us looking at anything that was close to that, and they gave us, like, a secret stern talking to about it, but, like, we never got, like, you know, I don't know what's the word, like an intervention or anything, though I'm sure if we had been less secretive about it and had like slipped up somewhere, then our parents definitely would have been concerned, because they were definitely trying their hardest to make sure that we were not queer. So if we were growing up right now, we'd probably be like 10 times more abused than we were in our actual childhood. I can never works. I can just use my parents' ID then. That's fair. But I mean, like, I'll say one thing. I don't want to say that it never works. I want to say that there are ways around it. Like, for example, who can get their hands on fake IDs. I have some friends growing up who have fake IDs, but like it makes the burden of like getting around those things harder, and a lot of people will not take those extra steps. It's like, a lot more extra effort. And making something harder to do won't make it so no one does it, but like it can reduce that thing. So I'm not 100% against having like some sort of age verification thing, but like outside of like something that has to do with harvesting your data or showing an ID, I'm not sure how else you could like not have some sort of like honor system to verify age, you know? NetChoice, a tech industry group opposing KOSA and COPPA 2.0, urged lawmakers to instead pass a federal comprehensive privacy bill and invest more in law enforcement efforts against child abuse and exploitation. That's an interesting thought. And I'm like, but also, like, there's some intersectionality there because it's just like, oh, I think the police have enough money. I don't think we need to fund the police anymore. Maybe they should divert their military weapons budget into efforts against child abuse and exploitation. That might be nice. That could be good. I like that idea. They won't do it. If passed, KOSA and COPPA 2.0 will create massive privacy and security problems for American families. NetChoice Vice President and General Counsel Carl Sasbo said in a statement, alternatively, NetChoice strongly recommends these meaningful constitutional solutions that will empower law enforcement to stop child predators and equip Americans of all ages to develop healthy online habits in the digital age. During the markup, committee leadership noted that they would continue to work on legislation and would consider changes before a floor vote. I've had some advocates, particularly in the LGBT community, about continuing concerns of this legislation. We'll continue to work with them on this, Chairwoman Maria Cantwell, Democrat in Washington, said. This bill isn't the last of privacy issues that we will consider in the committee, and we hope that we can return in September. We will be considering many more other issues related to this as well. Ranking member Senator Ted Cruz, Republican in Texas, said he will also consider adding a preemptive clause. Love how it just ends there. Ted Cruz will return. Marvel, fucking thing. Alright, speed of the clock just a little bit. July 28th, 2023. More than just queer people are being canaries in the coal mine for this. Do you know about Miracle Village in Florida? No. What's Miracle Village? Fanfiction writers rally fandoms against KOSA, the bill purporting to protect kids online. Why can't these Democratic senators see that they have completely betrayed the queer community? Fanfiction writers aren't just penning alternative universe reimaginings of the Barbie movie, or steamy scenes featuring Marvel superheroes. This week, they're writing letters to their senators, expressing their concerns that the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, could change the internet forever. Despite its appealing name, KOSA has been met with a flood of opposition from a variety of internet communities, from fandom Tumblr to digital privacy watchdogs. In particular, detractors worry that the bill could restrict queer kids' access to affirming online resources or make it easier for local governments to surveil abortion seekers. That reminds me of the fact that after the Supreme Court made their ruling about abortion rights being a state's issue, there were people being like, "Hey, delete any like menstruation tracking apps if you're someone who menstruates, because there's no telling if a company has to give your data to the government, and the government could track, your cycle and figure out, oh wait, you're pregnant, and be on watch for you to leave the state to get an abortion, which would be bad." Senator Marsha Blackburn, Tennessee Republican, and Richard Blumenthal, Connecticut Democrat, first introduced this bipartisan bill last year after a series of Senate hearings on the impact of social media on teen mental health. The bill aims to protect youth safety online by requiring platforms to limit addictive features, allow minors to opt out of algorithmic recommendation systems, and restrict access to a minor's personal data. Though these proposals may sound agreeable, more than 100 human rights and digital privacy organizations staunchly opposed the bill when it was first proposed, worrying that it could dramatically expand the collection of sensitive personal information and violate the privacy of older teens. The groups also believe that KOSA could not be enforced without requiring everyone on the internet to verify their age. Age verification may require users to provide platforms with personally identifiable information such as date of birth and government-issued identification documents, which can threaten users' privacy, including through the risk of data breaches. I was just thinking that right before I read that sentence. I was like, oh wait, if there's a data leak on a website that does that? Ooh, that's fucked. Yo, Draspy, thanks for the raid. Welcome, Raiders. We're talking about a very serious issue today. We're talking about KOSA and Kappa and how... Oh, hey, Colorful! Woo! We're talking about KOSA and Kappa and how it's gonna change the internet and how it's gonna be weaponized against LGBTQ youth and might require everyone on the internet to verify their age via legal documents that could very much harm privacy on the internet. A new phase of the internet might soon be beginning. Make sure to check the trigger warnings in the title just in case you may be sensitive to those things or don't feel that you can handle such heavy topics today. After I'm done with this, we'll be switching to Thornbite, who will be playing some video games and chilling out. If new here, hi. Drizzlebite of the Fluffbite Entertainment System. There's an 18+ stream where we talk about things related to kink, mental health, leftism, littles, indie games, and all sorts of other things. Hope folks are doing as well as they can out there. It's a hard world. Thanks again for the raid. Let me shout you out. And Draspy, make sure to take care of yourself. If you gotta step away from stream, that's totally fine. Thanks for sharing your community with me. You were playing Beneath a Still Sky. I've never heard of that one. Yeah. Sounds very poetic. Miracle Village is a community on Muck City Road, about 3 miles east of Paoki, Florida. That serves as a haven for registered sex offenders. It is located within one of the most isolated and poorest parts of Palm Beach country. It disgusts me. Oh, they literally just pushed a bunch of sex offenders into like a place that they made a ghetto for sex offenders. Got it. Damn. And it's called Miracle Village. That's like so what's the word here? Like, there's a juxtaposition there. It's kind of like Neverland Ranch in that way. Although that's not fair. Not all sex offenders are created equal, and you can become a sex offender without actually sexually assaulting someone. Even public urination can get you labeled as a sex offender. Was playing it for the last 15 minutes. Before it was trains and race cars and Marvel Snap. Ah, I see. I've literally never played Marvel Snap. Is it fun? Age verification may require users to provide platforms with personally identifiable information, such as date of birth and government-issued identification documents, which can threaten users' privacy, including through the risk of data breaches, and chill their willingness to access sensitive information online because they cannot do so anonymously, states the group's open letter, which includes signatories like GLAAD, the EFF, and ACLU. KOSA was then amended to state that platforms will not be required to implement age verification functionality. It remains unclear how these platforms could possibly adhere to KOSA's requirements without age gates. As it stands, the state attorney general would get the power to enforce KOSA's mandate for platforms to shield minors from harmful content. But then it's up to the attorney general to decide what is harmful and what is not. KOSA includes language that says the decisions must be consistent with evidence-informed medical information. However, medical research can easily be distorted to suit whatever argument a legislator wants to make. So advocates worry that this legislation could still be weaponized to censor content that affirms queer identities. The conservative actors that are in favor of KOSA have clearly said they want to use it to limit the access to content about being trans. Said Sarah Phillips, a 24-year-old BookTok creator turned digital organizer for Fight for the Future, the digital rights nonprofit mobilizing young people against bad internet bills. I said it with quotes because it was in quotes. But, like, I'm pretty sure, I don't know what BookTok is, but it sounds like Sarah Phillips is warning about the use of this against trans people, not in favor of it. But the mental health of queer and trans youth can significantly suffer when they are forced to suppress their identities, and when they can't be themselves at home or at school, they turn to the internet. A recent study from the Trevor Project, you know, the thing that I opened up this talk with, talking about how they had pulled out of @/Twitter because it's too much a hotbed for anti-LGBTQ sentiment and harassment. Yeah, that Trevor Project. A recent study from the Trevor Project found that young LGBTQ people who feel safe and understood in online spaces are 20% less likely to have attempted suicide in the last year. LGBTQ youth are clearly under attack across the country, Phillip told TechCrunch. This year, a record 520 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures, according to the Human Rights Campaign. 70 of these bills have become laws, including ones that limit school curriculums that ban gender-affirming care for trans youth. In Florida, the infamous "Don't Say Gay" law was broadened to impact students through 12th grade, limiting instruction related to sexuality and gender identity. Online is one of the few places where, if you're trans or a queer creator or artist, you will be accepted. You will find community. You will find your people. If you can't see it when you go to my bio, then just follow the formula, which is / and my username, and put it in the browser, Kids Online Safety KOSA. I'm also thinking about the whole, like, affecting adults thing. Just because the bill won't require, it won't require social media sites to do an age verification, those companies might opt for age verification anyway, because when it comes to a company being liable, they'll just play it as safe as humanly possible. When the DMCA thing got passed, it completely changed YouTube, and even the smallest thing used under fair use can still get claimed, and people even copyright claim stuff that they don't have a right to copyright claim and abuse it to silence creators or just troll people, honestly. So, like, it may happen that a lot of queer positive stuff could be filtered out of fear that they'll be liable for something with COPPA or KOSA, and they just want to play it safe because they want to protect their bottom line. That's what I'm scared about. I hope that gives you a clear picture of it. They were not pushed, but started by a pedo. Oh, I see. That's weird. Sex Offender Village. Marble Snap can be pretty fun and addicting. The matches are pretty short and unpredictable. I see. Oh, what about the Trevor Project? Oh, the Trevor Project pulled out of Twitter slash X because of all the anti-LGBTQ sentiment and harassment, and they're just like, it's not a safe space for LGBTQ people, especially the youth. And they want to, like, help people, so they actually made their own social media site specifically for their target demographic of, what was it, 13 to 24. But they suspended their Twitter account because they're just like, this is not good. There's not enough moderation on this site. It's a hotbed for, like, queerphobia, so we're out. They announced that on like 5 days ago, on the 9th. Although this article is from July, so like they saw the writing on the wall quite easily. And one recent TikTok, wait. Excuse me. For nearly half a year, 25-year-old Omar's big sister has used the internet to geek out in niche fandoms, building a platform of over 100,000 followers. While she used to post esoteric TikToks imagining the Omegaverse during Ramadan. Fucking Christ. If you know what the Omegaverse is, you know. Her TikToks have become more political, emphasizing the risks that KOSA and other internet bills have for queer youth. This is how I have a community, she told TechCrunch. This is how I can have diverse friendships. Like, I'm in the middle of the Midwest. It's not exactly diverse here. As someone who grew up in the Midwest, even though I grew up in like I was lucky enough to grow up in a diverse city, yeah, I can see that. In one recent TikTok, she writes, when someone from the ACLU invites you to a meeting because of your videos on KOSA, but if that means very fancy national lawyers who are in Supreme Court cases saw your Omegaverse TikToks. Shit, I'm gonna have to deal with that too one day, aren't I? Well, I mean, I don't think the political pundits are just gonna be like, hey, Fluffbite, can we get your word on this bad thing you talked about? But shit, who the hell knows? I'm pretty sure anyone who is gonna come into the stream like, ooh, piss pants, is gonna get a mighty big surprise with this topic. Are my burpees cute? I hope they're cute. She's been joined in by this activism by a number of other creators who are seeking to mobilize communities they built around fan fiction and fandom. I learned how to be a digital organizer in fandom spaces, Phillips said. That's how I learned to get people energized about something and how the internet can work in a political campaign. Drake George. You have two first names, but okay. Drake George, who goes live on TikTok to read fluffy bedtime anime fanfiction to their 123,000 followers, says the fandom communities tend to appeal to queer teens since they can offer a form of escapism. I found such a beautiful, diverse group of feeling safe and included and talking with this community as a queer person myself, George told TechCrunch. And if a Florida teenager can't talk about being queer at school under Don't Say Gay, they can at least be themselves on the internet, but activists worry that KOSA could strip that right away too. George says the fandom communities become more concerned about bills like KOSA in early July, when the beloved fanfiction nonprofit, Archive of Our Own, went offline due to a DDoS attack from a hacker group. I did not know Archive of Our Own was a nonprofit. You learn new things every day. Yeah, I have cute burpees. Goal achieved. There is a speculation that this hacker group specifically target AO3 because of the queer content that was on it, George said. Though AO3 came back online within a day, fans worried that the attack could be a harbinger of future problems. If a state attorney general decided under KOSA that fan fiction about queer people, mental health, or sex was dangerous to teens, a site like AO3 may be decimated. There are groups of people who think that this queer, diverse content should not be accessible and should not be published, George told TechCrunch. I think that the AO3's shutdown really kind of made that a small reality for people. George Phillips and Omar Big Sister all mentioned receiving frantic DMs from their teen followers who worried that they could be severed from the internet circles that allow them to safely be themselves. So it's not just adults saying this might be bad. If a 12-year-old can read the bill and understand it is a dangerous thing, why can't these Democratic senators? Why can't these Democratic senators see that they have completely betrayed the queer community? Wow. They literally ended it with the fucking byline. That was a good article. That was like, it was structured well. Okay, moving forward in time a little bit, September of this year, we're getting closer and closer to the present. This is one of my favorite places to go for queer news, specifically trans news. Aaron in the morning. Aaron almost literally posts at least every weekday, but I think possibly every day, a news story about something happening with like transgender news. Usually attacks on our rights. Yay. And this is gonna talk more about the like concerted effort about using KOSA to do the thing that people were worried about. It's not gonna be an accident if it happens. It's gonna be very purposeful. Just had to get my Wawa out. Senator admits Kid Online Safety Act will target trans content online. The lead sponsor of the Kids Online Safety Act, known as KOSA, has stated that it will be used to protect minor children from the transgender in our culture, in an interview released this weekend. A bill with bipartisan backing is quietly making its way through Congress, and it could pose a significant threat to LGBTQ plus online content. Officially named the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, the legislation ostensibly aims to limit minors' access to social media, control the content they see, and enhance privacy and parental supervision features on social platforms. However, certain provisions of the bill have alarmed LGBTQ plus advocates who worry that they could be exploited to censor LGBTQ plus material online. This concern has gradually been validated as several key supporters of the bill have explicitly stated their intention to use its provisions to target such content. Sorry. Those concerns materialized in an interview released this weekend, when the bill's chief sponsor, Senator Marsha Blackburn, alarmingly made a candid statement about her goals for legislation, saying it will be used to protect minor children from the transgender in our culture. First introduced in February 2022, KOSA gained little momentum until its recent reintroduction in May 2023. The bill boasts broad bipartisan backing, with 43 co-sponsors listed, including 21 Democratic senators. Even President Biden has endorsed the legislation, emphatically saying, pass it, pass it, pass it, bop it, twist it, pull it. However, some of the bill's provisions could easily have been penned by the most fervent anti-LGBTQ plus advocates who are pushing targeted legislation against transgender individuals in the US this year. While many aspects of KOSA are condemnable, such as incentivizing social media platforms to curb compulsive usage among minors and bolstering privacy protections, certain elements are ripe for exploitation against transgender content. The section raising the most eyebrows is dubbed the duty of care. According to the bill, social media companies are required to implement measures to prevent and mitigate issues like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance use disorders, and suicidal behaviors. Here's a closer look at that section. Prevention of harm to minors. A covered platform shall act in the best interest of the user that the platform knows or reasonably should know is a minor by taking reasonable measures in its design and operation of products and services to prevent and mitigate the following. Consistent with evidence-informed medical information, the following mental health disorders: anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance use disorders, and suicidal behaviors. the fact that the U.S. Controls global internet is a problem. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that shade of it. And it won't be the first time it's happened. A lot of websites or a lot of web domains that are in other countries are going to have to decide whether or not they want to operate in America anymore or have access to, for Americans. Because, like, some people might say, well, it's probably better to, like, not have to comply with this thing so that, you know, LGBTQ stuff won't be suppressed. Though I can't imagine a lot of world governments actually caring enough about LGBTQ plus people to actually do that. Well, you know, America's a big bad bully. Although transition has although transition has been proven to improve mental health among transgender people and reduce the risk of suicide, Republicans and state legislators across the United States this year have issued faulty arguments that being transgender harms minors' mental health and that exposure to transgender content and people is dangerous. Later, the bill empowers state attorney general to file suit to force compliance with the bill. For those who have been monitoring the actions of state attorneys, the state attorneys general in states with anti-transgender agendas this year, the potential weaponization of such legislation against transgender people is abundantly clear. In 2022, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton made headlines by issuing a directive to investigate all parents of transgender youth for child abuse, an action that clearly resulted in these children being removed from their families. Fortunately, the courts blocked this directive. This year, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey criminalized access to health care for transgender minors and many adults by decree. These, though many parts were blocked by the courts there as well, recently 7 state attorneys general co-signed a letter arguing that LGBTQ plus merchandise could be classified as obscene and detrimental to minors. Just like a queer flag t-shirt. In Montana, a bill was nearly amended to ban acts of transgenderism on the internet as harmful to minors. Given this context, it's easier to foresee how they might wield the new bill to target transgender content online. So it's not just about minors' access to that content. They'll use it to take that content offline or make it so it has to be behind like 18 plus age gates. This is not purely a matter of speculation. Anti-LGBTQ organizations have explicitly stated their intentions regarding the bill. For example, in an article titled "How Big Tech Turns Kids Trans," the Heritage Foundation voiced support for the legislation. When advocates highlighted that this right-wing organization, already a staunch supporter of KOSA, advocated for using the bill in this manner, the Heritage Foundation doubled down. They stated, keeping trans content away from children is protecting kids. No child should be conditioned to think that permanently damaging their healthy bodies to try to become something they can never be is even remotely a good idea. Fuck them. And perhaps the clearest example of red flags against this law, one of the biggest sponsors of the bill, Senator Marsha Blackburn, said that the bill would be used to protect minor children from the transgender in our culture. See her quote here. Gosh.
Issues like life and gender. What do you think is the top issue that they should be watching and the top issue that conservatives should be taking action on right now?
Well, there are a couple of things. Of course, protecting minor children from the transgender and this culture and that influence. And I would add to that, watching what's happening on social media. And I've got the Kids Online Safety Act that I think we're going to end up getting through probably this summer. This would put a duty of care and responsibility on the social media platforms. And this is where children are being indoctrinated. They're hearing things at school, and then they're getting onto YouTube to watch a video, and all of a sudden this comes to them.
It's not all of a sudden. It's, this sounds like something that might be interesting. Let me use an example that doesn't have to do with being trans. Being plural. When I first heard the term plural, on Twitter actually. I didn't know what the context of its use was in the tweet that I read. And I was looking at the person who posted it and looking at tags that had to do with plurality and trying to figure out what it meant. And then from there, I went to Google trying to find plural resources. And I found some comics talking about it. I found some articles talking about it. I found some blogs talking about it. And I used that to piece together, or we used that to piece together information on what being plural was, on multiplicity, and that sort of stuff. And from there, making the informed decision is like, oh shit, we're a system. It's so, even though there are some places that it's not completely outlawed to put someone in conversion therapy, I feel like Republicans are trying to do the next best thing, where it's like, okay, I can't put kids in conversion therapy. However, if I limit their access to information about transgenderism, then I can limit their access to the ability to advocate for themselves as trans. They push your transition back as far as humanly possible, and then try to make transitioning as an adult even harder, so you just decide to stay closeted your whole life. That's basically their game plan. And however many people hurt themselves because of this, they'll think is a good thing. She looks like Palpatine in drag. Even without targeted measures, the Kids Online Safety Act could have severely detrimental consequences for LGBTQ plus online content. Social media platforms are already known for self-censoring such content. Reports from GLAAD indicate that LGBTQ plus material often faces demonetization, removal, or shadow banning, further complicating the issue. This was literally a thing that YouTube at one point admitted they were doing. They say they fixed it, but I'm not convinced. Further complicating the issue, some content moderators work in social or cultural contexts where LGBT plus activities are either illegal or socially stigmatized. This situation frequently leads to insufficient training, resulting in unwarranted suppression of legitimate LGBT plus content. KOSA would institutionalize such practices, increasing the likelihood of such censorship. Given the risk of legal action from state attorneys general, platforms would likely engage in preemptive self-censorship for LGBTQ plus material. This is what industries always do. It's not just the internet thing. The ESRB that rates video games, the ESRB exists so that the government doesn't do that same thing. For example. Despite these alarming implications, opposition to KOSA has been surprisingly tepid, even among groups typically considered stalwart allies of the LGBTQ plus community. While several queer organizations did sign a letter opposing KOSA in 2022, opposition has largely waned since from these groups. Internal sources at multiple LGBTQ plus organizations have informed me that their stances have moved to organizational neutrality. Moreover, a recent report from the LA Blade disclosed that in private discussions with key stakeholders, significant LGBTQ plus organizations such as GLAAD, GLSEN, and PFLAG have quietly withdrawn their opposition to the bill, citing meaningful conversations from key allies. That's pretty not what's the word I'm looking for? Transparent? It's not transparent at all. I wonder what fucking deals they've made under the table. Damn, GLAAD. Given the rare bipartisan backing and enjoys, along with President Biden's endorsement, KOSA warrants vigilant scrutiny. In an era where few legislative efforts garner cross-party support, the bill's broad appeal makes it particularly noteworthy. However, KOSA has also emerged as a troubling point of divergence, pitting LGBTQ plus activists against organizations meant to represent their interests, as well as Democratic officers who have otherwise been vocal critics of anti-LGBT plus legislation. This divide highlights the potential for a serious misstep by those who otherwise support transgender people and can result in significant harm for the community should it pass. I used to work for an organization that championed for LGBTQ rights, and more than once they ended up endorsing candidates that ended up passing anti-LGBTQ laws. They weren't very good at their job. And I guess that's still true. We're almost to the present. This is still September 5th. Senator appeared to suggest bipartisan bill would censor transgender content online. So this is the same thingy. Biden expressed his support for the bill in remarks to reporters in July, saying, "We've got to hold these platforms accountable for the national experiment they're conducting on our children for profit." I don't know how to tell Biden this, but they've been doing the same thing to adults, like, and disabled people. Like, one thing that's ancillary to this whole discussion that always gets my goat is that, like, there's a certain focus on protecting children from things that also harm adults, and there's like this idea in society that once you turn to 18 or 21 or 25 or 30 or whatever arbitrary age someone sets, you no longer need compassion, you no longer need protection, you're a big strong adult and you can't be manipulated by targeted advertising. It's your choice. Even though there's just like social drinking, having something like a Twitter or a Facebook is like instrumental to connecting with other people online, and you have to wade through all the bullshit that has to deal with that. Christ. On that cracker. I'm not sure if I wanted to read this this whole article, considering like it's talking about the exact same thing as the last one, but it's not that long. A co-sponsor of a bipartisan bill intended to protect children from the dangers of social media and other online content appeared to suggest in March that the measure could be used to steer kids away from seeing transgender content online. In a video recently published by the conservative group Family Policy Alliance, Senator Marsha Blackburn said protecting children from the transgender in this culture should be among the top priorities of conservative lawmakers. While the video was made public Friday, the interview took place in March at an event held at the Palomino Family Council, a faith-based organization. In the same minute-and-a-half video, Blackburn lauded the Kids Online Safety Act, a bipartisan bill introduced in May that will allow parents to sue social media companies and their online platforms if they do not sufficiently shield children under the age of 13 from harmful content on their platforms. The measure was introduced by Blackburn and Senator Richard Blumenthal and has been endorsed by President Joe Biden. This will put a duty of care and responsibility. Yeah, that was from, it's literally a quote from the video. Blackburn added, "Parents need to be watching this. Teachers need to be watching and protecting our children and making certain that they are not exposed to things that they are emotionally not mature enough to handle." Gosh, I know I have to be mature to be trans. Now I'm thinking about the thing of also attacking autistic people, being like, "You're autistic. We can't trust you to know about your own identity. You can't transition." Shit, in some states, if you're autistic, you can't get married. In an era where few legislative efforts garner cross-party support, the bill's broad appeal makes it particularly noteworthy. Trans advocate Erin Reed, the article I just wrote, in her Substack publication Erin in the Morning on Sunday, however, KOSA has also emerged as a troubling point of divergence, pitting LGBTQ plus activists against organizations meant to represent their interests, as well as the Democratic officials who have otherwise been vocal critics of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. Maybe they were just paying lip service to their constituents so they wouldn't be too mad at them. Reed added that this divide highlights the potential for a serious misstep for those who otherwise support transgender people and could result in significant harm for the community should it pass. Later that day, however, Blackburn's legislative director, Jamie Susskind, pushed back on the notion that the bill would censor transgender content online and appeared to suggest that Blackburn misspoke. Once it's passed, they'll be able to say anything they want. And they'll be like, haha, I tricked you. In response to the Los Angeles Blade article about Blackburn's remarks titled U.S. Senator, Kids Online Safety Act will target trans content, Susskind wrote, They're literally named Sus! They're literally named Sus! I'm having a real hard time. The truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. It's totally sus. They wrote this is false. These are two separate issues being taken out of context. KOSA will not, nor was it designed to target or censor any individual or community. In a phone call on Tuesday, a spokesperson for Blackburn pointed NBC News to Susskind's tweet. When asked about Blackburn's remarks and the subsequent response from transgender advocates, the bill's lead Democratic sponsor, Senator Blumenthal, said in an email stated on Tuesday that the Kids Online Safety Act does not target or censor anyone, including members of the LGBTQ community. If the language will allow it, then it can be used for that. This isn't the first time that folks have said shit like this. It's the same thing when they passed the anti-sex trafficking bill. It was used to target and discriminate sex workers and push them into more dangerous environments. I don't know if there's a logical fallacy there with it's like, hey, this thing can be used to abuse a thing, and the person responds, well, it doesn't say that outright, and it's like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't say it outright, it allows these things to happen. This stuff is too general and vague, and it's like, we never said that we were gonna use it to genocide. What do you mean? Nick, you're such a lame-o. I bet you don't even polish your scales. Ashy ass scales. Ashy with baby powder. Striking the right balance between supporting safe online spaces and protecting against toxic content targeting LGBTQ youth is very important to us, which is why my staff and I had extensive and collaborative conversations with stakeholders, including LGBTQ groups, to further clarify the legislation text so that it better reflects the intent of the bill. Blumenthal said these changes are reflected in the reintroduced version of the bill. But you had that discussion behind closed doors. If you want to be completely believed, then you and those organizations like GLAAD and PFLAG would have said more than the vagaries of, oh, we came to some agreements. Biden expressed his support for the bill in remarks to reporters in July, saying, we've got to hold these platforms accountable for the national experiment they're conducting on our children for profit. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Social media companies have largely come out in opposition to the Kids Online Safety Act and several other pieces of proposed legislation recently introduced in Congress to regulate their platforms. Don't be fooled, I will say. It is not because they believe in queer rights. It's because they don't want to spend extra resources to moderate their platforms more. Even if a lot of queer people actually were okay with KOSA and it didn't have language that could be abused, I'm pretty sure social media companies would still be opposed to KOSA. Just saying. The enemy of my enemy is only my friend for a certain amount of time. Less stretchies. Hey, puppy. I have to take off my headphones for stretchies. Oh. Crap. crack my neck and my claws. Swish my tail and my wings. Whew. Ooh. Wow, creaky skills. Wow. Hey, puppy. How are you today? Okay, so this Nets thing is a little bit, is a little bit. I've been saying the word ancillary for a while, like kind of like on the cusp or on the edge of, or like related but branching. This is one of those things. It's related but branching. This is a conversation about what's been proposed, what some people are proposing, one tech person in particular has proposed in terms of protecting people online with online privacy and like advocacy for their own like rights and stuff. I don't think this is technically included in KOSA, but it is something relevant because I've already mentioned that like protecting people's online data and like fighting against targeted advertising and being able to like opt in to certain things and having control over like what media companies are doing to your information, let alone if they are even allowed to gather information. These are relevant things to regulate. Like there are reasons to regulate the internet. It just has to be done in the right way. I'm not gonna read this whole thing. It's basically a podcast. The Neely Center has developed a design code that seeks to address a number of concerns about the harms of social media, including issues related to child online safety. It is endorsed by individuals and organizations ranging from academics and NYU and USC to the Tech Justice Law Project and New Public, as well as technologies that have worked at platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and Google. Probably before Twitter became shit. I spoke to Lyre about the details of the proposed code, and in particular how they relate to the debate over child online safety. What follows is a lightly edited transcript of the discussion. What does the Center of Ethical Leadership and Decision Making get up to? So we focus on ethics and technology. That's part because we think technology is an important force in the world that has a powerful shaping effects on our behavior and has powerful effects on both our individual well-being and our societal well-being. So we think that it's not only a way that it's not the only way we could have focused on, but it's the thing that we think is the best lever to control, the lever to focus on at this moment. And so I was lucky enough, a professor I used to work with back in academia when I was a psychologist by trade. When I was leaving Meta, he happened to become the director of the center, and so he brought me on board to help move their work forward. Meta is Facebook. Some of my listeners may be familiar with you and your work. You published in Tech Policy Press, which I'm grateful for. For those who might not know you, say a word or two about your career at Meta and what you got up to there. Well, I started my time at Meta as a data science manager for the news feed integrity, and I've done a lot of work on polarization. I have an academic degree in social psychology, and I've done some work with Jonathan Haidt on polarization. I also helped a friend of mine start a company called Ranker, and I've heard of that. And so I had this dual tech career and career studying polarization. And somebody said, "Well, you go work at Facebook, and you can work on polarization and can impact a lot of people." So I did that. That's great. About 6 months into my time there, there's a sort of serious Wall Street Journal article about them depreciating their effects on polarization. So I moved my family up there, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I came here to work on polarization, but I figured out ways to work on polarization without necessarily working on polarization. There were still avenues, places where the company was willing to lean in a bit more. Things like elections, things like at-risk countries. If you don't know, a little background for that statement, Mark Zuckerberg was in hot water because of how Russia kind of fucked with American elections when Trump got elected, I believe. In the way of like forwarding disinformation and increasing polarization between different political people. For example, I believe Facebook had an increased chance of showing you political content you were opposed to on purpose, for example. This reminds me of a comic where character A is like, why do you want to kill me? And character B is like, I never said I want to kill you. Show me your proof. And then character A shows him a video of character B saying, I won't rest until I put character A in a grave. And then it cuts back to character B being like, I never said kill. Gosh, that's like some Vosh level of like denial. Christ. Yeah, it's pretty much like that, honestly. I actually moved from being a data science manager to being a research manager where I can ask users if their definitions of hate speech match our definitions of hate speech. Ooh, this is interesting. Often, they didn't. And I eventually realized that the only way to attack these problems more broadly was to move from the integrity efforts to more of the core product team. So I ended up my time there working on core newsfeed team, just trying to figure out how to attack these problems upstream from a design angle, as opposed to a downstream like cleaning up after whatever the other teams were doing angles. So that informs a lot of my time since leaving Facebook, where I try to bring that experience and message to the wider world because I think a lot of things we did at Facebook could be done more aggressively. They can apply to TikTok, they can apply to YouTube. So I'm hopeful that by applying these lessons, I can at least have even more impact. So one of the ways that I think of you in my mind through the phrase that you use in the post that you published not terribly long, I think. After you got into this new line of work, you're in the moment, which is that content moderation is a dead end. So for a lot of folks listening to this who are on trust and safety type of work, or perhaps they're done a lot of work on disinformation or what have you, that type of phrase might be fighting words. Why do you say content moderation is a dead end? How is this a jumping off point for your work? I know a lot of Discord moderators that will have a bone to pick with that statement. And moderators do definitely help communities, but I think like maybe in turn it's a different beast with like a closed community like say this as opposed to a platform, because like not everyone on Twitch, for example, has individual moderators, but Twitch does have moderation tools, and you can find third-party moderation tools to help you, which we have also implemented. There's like a list of like bad actors and accounts that have like harassed queer people. They're automatically on a ban list and do not have access to watching our streams, for example. Oh, hey Chloe. Things are okay, I guess. I hope you're okay. Feeling sleepy, not gonna lie. Can you afford to sleep right now, puppy? I mean, I love a good midday nap myself. So I don't mean to say that content moderation is valueless. I chose the phrase dead end intentionally, and I think honestly a lot of people, I worked alongside many people who work in trust and safety integrity teams, and a lot of those people agree with me. You work on these problems, you wake up the next day, you're working on the same problem. You're wondering, can I fix this problem at a more root level as opposed to fixing this problem with a moderation-based approach? So I chose that end for a reason. I chose it to indicate that it's not going to get us to the place where we want to get to. Not that content moderation and people who do moderation don't do important and good work. But I often refer to Marina Ricci's analogy of taking a dirty stream, and you scoop a glass of water out of that stream and you clean that glass of water and you dump it back in the stream. And I'm not saying that it's not important to clean a glass of water, because maybe you're going to drink that glass of water. So it's important to improve people's experiences, certainly, but you need to address the upstream design of those systems. What is polluting that stream in the first place? Or else you're going to wake up every day trying to clean more and more glasses of water, and in a world of generative AI, that's gonna get even worse. I want to add to this analogy that, or I want to say based on this analogy, it's like, something that is polluting something upstream and ruining the experience of nature for everyone. And, you know, the basic building blocks of life. Capitalism. It was capitalism the whole time. Also, also is part of the reason that some sort of moderation and protection for child safety online is even necessary. Part of the reason. Apart from a cold that's clinging on, I'm good. Woke up, moved to my chair, opened Twitch, passed out for 2 hours. This cold drained my energy. Damn, I hope you got off of work at least. Though I had a dream where I was playing Dark Souls 1 as Kratos from God of War, so that was fun. Damn, that sounds sick as hell. I like cool video game dreams. So it's important to improve people's experiences, certainly, but you need to address the upstream design of those systems, and what's polluting the stream in the first place, or else you're going to wake up every day trying to clean more and more glasses of water, and in a world generative AI, that's going to get even worse. So I chose content moderation as a dead end intentionally to help move people from, in my opinion, a place where they were to a place where they needed to get to. But it was not meant to say that content moderation doesn't do some good important work. So we're going to talk about this topic a little bit, specifically about the child online safety. You've just in the last couple of months had some thinking that you put into the world, particularly about responses to the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, of course. There's other legislation across the country that's been, in some cases, put into law around child online safety, including the California Age Appropriate Design Code and some of the perhaps more restrictive and different laws that have gone in places like Arkansas, Utah, etc. Talk to me about this work, this idea of improving the duty of care. KOSA has this duty of care, and that's one of the main sticking points amongst advocates who look at these things. What's working on here? So I think that the people behind these efforts are absolutely in the right place with their intentions. I think everyone would agree the platforms should act in the best interest of minors. I do think that when you are not more specific about exactly what you mean, then it leaves room for both people to argue that you're actually trying to legislate what people can and can't say, which is unconstitutional, or that you're trying to, or at least room for people to abuse these efforts, right? So some people say a duty of care means that you can't see content from LGBTQ plus members of the community because it's harmful to youth. So people can twist the duty of care in different ways. People can think you mean things that you don't. And so I think there's value into being specific. We recently came up with a design code effort. We intentionally tried to prescribe exactly how it gets implemented, so platforms can do these things voluntarily. There are ways that app stores could play a role in these efforts, but I think that the important thing is to be specific about what we want. And so whether it's something that gets implemented as part of a duty of care, which is something I support, I just think it can be improved upon by being more specific versus a more vague duty of care is just prone to abuse and prone to legal challenge.
Just subscribed.
Oh,
it's
shit.
Dangerous to go alone. Take this Prime sub. Cause heck Twitch.
Heck Twitch. Thank you for the subscribbles. I appreciate you. Yeah. I hope you feel less sick soon. I took a whole week off of work. I got sick day one. Literally slept through 3/4 of my vacation. I was irked to say the least. However, the time off work was still enjoyed. Well, I'm glad you got at least a little bit of rest. Or, well, I mean, I guess a lot of bit of rest. I'm glad you enjoyed your rest. I have peanut butter cookies. Still sleepy, though. Aww. Now I want coffee and cookies. I had cookies earlier this week, though. Went to Insomnia Cookies with our partner. It was great. Cookies. I really like a white macadamian. Actually, honestly, a white macadamian chocolate chip oatmeal raisin cookie would be so bomb. Honestly, also a snickerdoodle. I agree with this guy who's talking about we need to be more specific. And I don't want to say that like all the Democrats who are supporting KOSA are like underhandedly actually transphobic. I mean, some of them surely are, but like, I don't know, hell is paved with good intentions or whatever. So like, it's just like people being ignored. And at the same time, they feel like they have been listening because these big like LGBTQ rights organizations and civil liberties organizations have talked to them behind closed doors, and like they say they fix things. But I still feel that there should be more transparency involved. I'm really worried about that. And I haven't actually read the new version of KOSA, so I can't say for sure whether or not it's like the language is not vague enough to be abused. I guess we'll have to see. Yeah, oat milk cookies fucking rock. I would make cookies when our oven's broken. And so, whether it's something that gets implemented as part of a duty of care, which is something I support, I just think it can be improved upon by being more specific versus a more vague duty of care. It's just prone to abuse and prone to legal challenge. Let's talk about the duty of care that's presently in KOSA for just a minute. So you mentioned this idea of requiring a platform to act in the best interest of the user. There's literally a point A under Section 3 of KOSA's duty of care. Covered platforms shall act in the best interest of a user that the platform knows or reasonably should know as a minor by taking reasonable measures in its design and operation of products and services to prevent and mitigate the following. And then, of course, it goes through a lot of bad things that might happen to you, whether it's addiction, like bad behaviors, violence, online bullying, deceptive marketing practices, financial harm, etc. So it's interesting, I guess, in this. It's one of the places where I think maybe critics get hung up. There's some language, certainly in the limitation, that begins to suggest that the intent here is about limiting content, about content moderation. This is an exception, of course. That says that nothing in this, in the duty of care, shall be constituted to require a platform to prevent or preclude any minor from deliberately and independently searching for or specifically requesting content. It's almost like just baked into it, there's just a sort of presumption that, of course, as a result of complying with KOSA, the platforms are going to remove content from people's feeds. That's part of the goal here. Yeah, I think it's somewhat unclear when you read it, right? And I think part of this is a goal to have your cake and eat it too, where you want to address the design of the platforms, but you also want to make a nod to the content that they're attempting to address. So I do think that there is room. And so I do think that there is room. I don't, again, applaud the efforts. Oh, no, that's a comma, not a period. And so I do think that there is room. I again applaud the efforts. I think all bills move the conversation forward. I'm not here to criticize, no bill is perfect, but I should say that in the interest of moving things forward, yes, I do think that a more specific focus on the design would be a better bill. As the bill evolves, I'm hoping that it evolves in that direction. Dude, that's literally criticism. I don't know what you mean. I'm not here to criticize. Immediately follows up with a criticalism. Did you know that white chocolate macadamia nut cookies are the favorite cookies of the creator of Cookie Clicker? No, I did not. I've never even played Cookie Clicker. The Cookie Clicker dev has good taste, though. Fucking Christ, I love those fucking cookies. I would eat like 6 of those right now. Easily. Like, I put them in the microwave first, because I like my cookies warm. So the design code, it reflects a lot of best practices that I experienced in my time. I just love how it's like, ooh, cookie. KOSA is a bad bill because XYZ, big people speak. So the design code, it reflects a lot of best practices that I experienced in my time at Meta, like the things that were most effective in crisis settings. In elections, people will often say things like, why don't we have these things all the time? I felt like that about the fucking, the income assistance thingy during COVID. And it's like, so the government can give people money to survive. Whoa. People on the outside would say, look at these break the glass measures that platforms would do. And they'd be like, I don't understand why you would ever turn them off. And when I left Meta, I would talk to people at other companies, and many other companies would do some similar things. So the things in the design code are meant to be things that a broad set of people in society would agree with that hopefully transcend political divisions. I don't think a lot of things transcend political divisions, but go off. And so there are things like don't optimize for engagement, instead optimize for quality, especially for important conversations. These are things like a lot allow users to tell you things that they don't want to see. This is transcript based on what someone said, so the fact that like some of the grammar is like off, I think is part of the reason why it's like weird to read somewhere. Some of these moments. Or do you want to see even when it's contradicted by their engagement signals? Because there's lots of things I will engage with that I don't actually want to. So there are things like rate limiting accounts so that small groups of people can't dominate an information space. That would make it so less people could poison the well. Because honestly, there's a lot of situations where a minority of people have the majority of like the visibility in the space, and they control the conversation. So I do think that's valuable. There are things like privacy defaults. It talks a little bit about how some of these things are really important, especially for minors. And then it talks at the end. It talks about, here's some things that I've learned or people have learned through product experimentation. Understanding two different versions of a product that actually leads to a better experience, both for outcomes of interest to democracy, but also outcomes of interest to children's well-being. And it talks about how we've learned these lessons through product experimentation. We need to have product experimentation results going forward if we're going to think about the net set of design codes as well. That burp was me, not the article. Imagine putting burps in the transcript. So there are 9 basic principles in the design code, the details of which, of course, you can find in the show notes of this podcast, which I have already pulled up, I think. Yes. So let's actually look at these now. Okay. So there's, was it 9 things? Allow users to easily and explicitly indicate content they do or do not want and respect users' explicit preferences even if contradicted by users' engagement. Sometimes I might want to look at something that might be particularly triggering to me, but I'm looking up that thing manually. Don't just flashbang me with the fucked up shit. Easily means that indicating unwanted content should be a top-level action that requires no clicks to access. Explicitly means that the interface should clearly indicate that this is a subjective negative action with no required connection to formal platform policies. Respecting this preference means that users would not be shown such content unless they explicitly seek it out, e.g. via search. Goal: allow greater explicit user agency to improve subjective user experience. The fact that you gotta like on Twitter or something, like literally individually block out a bunch of words can be a little overwhelming for some people, though other folks do find it easy. But I feel like it should be more accessible for sure. 2. Especially for conversations that users deem important or sensitive, e.g. about politics, religion, race, crime, health, finance, sexuality, etc., replace engagement optimizations, view time, comment, shares, more ad distribution with optimizations for user perceived quality. This reminds me of when they took the downvote for YouTube off. Fun fact, there are some plugins you can get to restore the downvote numbers so you can actually see how many people downvoted that. People have literally talked about how taking away downvotes makes it so you can't like gauge quality of a post, and obviously that there's gonna be some stuff where you're gonna get a lot of downvotes even though your content is quality, because a lot of people disagree with you, maybe on a divisive issue, or maybe because you're being hate bombed, right? But like, it does give a random user coming across content a little bit of a warning that a lot of people did not like this content. And depending on what it is, it can really inform you on how much you should trust that content. Engagement refers to any behavior that does not indicate an explicit user preference, since users may spend time on, comment on, or share content that they actually dislike or find to be low quality. Optimizations refer to any increased algorithmic visibility or distribution due to the use of a particular signal, including advertisements. Quality refers to user perceptions of quality, which can be measured in a variety of ways. Sensitive conversations refers to domains where quality information is especially important for user and and societal well-being, including but not limited to discussions of politics, religion, race, crime, health, finance, sexuality, and more. For a recent example, when talk about the war between Israel and Palestine came up recently, there was a lot of misinformation showing provocative imagery of Israelis being like harmed or tortured or killed. A lot of it being made with like AI to propagandize, or using footage from old wars or old conflicts, some that don't have to do with the current conflict at all, to say, oh, this is actually what Hamas is doing. And it's like that wasn't even Hamas though. And a lot of advocacy organizations trying to help Palestinians and trying to get information out there to people so they can make informed decisions about things were having to spend most of their time not actually informing the public, but most of their time discrediting bad actors who were trying to stir the pot. So that could easily be implemented and certainly should. Reduce bad experiences for users, e.g. sensational and divisive political discussions, and improve ecosystem of incentives for publishers, e.g. the financial incentive to spread divisive misinformation. Disinformation is a super huge tool online for political action now, especially, on the right. Also, a comment section will be a majority support from the fans versus the like-dislike, which will assure a more accurate number of people who did not care for the video. Oh yeah, comment sections are very useful. It gives you a much more qualitative measurement of if something was bad or not. Okay, we're almost on 2 hours of talking about this, but we're almost done. We only have after we finish the thing that this is referenced from, we only have one more article left. Diverse approval is a good sign of quality, which should lead to better experiences for users. Reduce ecosystem vulnerability to manipulation by narrow groups. Improve ecosystem incentives. 3. Prioritize public amplification to actors that verified users explicitly know and trust. That varied users explicitly know and trust. Prioritize means that these actors would get greater relative distribution. Public amplification refers to increasing the visibility or distribution of messages to unknown others, often via algorithms. Varied refers to a set of users who have minimally different behaviors and histories online. For the purposes of this code, varied is meant to be a low bar involving individuals who exhibit some degree of differential behavior rather than requiring universal trust, which would unnecessarily strife dissent. The goal is to make information spaces more robust to manipulation by extremely narrow groups. Trust refers to the subjective judgment of users, where platforms would have to be transparent about what signs they use to infer trust, a history of explicit positive interactions. For example, if a famous right-wing pundit who gets more and more unhinged on Twitter every day starts saying things that even with his degree, he does not have a sort of he does not have the required experience to speak accurately about, maybe we should know that instead of that person's stuff going to the top of the page just because he's popular. Kind of makes sense, I think. Diverse approval is a good sign of quality, which should lead to better experiences for users, reduce ecosystem vulnerability to manipulation by narrow groups, improve ecosystem incentives. I felt like I had to reread that now, since I read it in the wrong order. 4. Allow users to accessibly opt out of revenue maximizing design features. Optimizing for time spent, infinite scroll, autoplay. They encourage greater usage. This is one of the ones that I think will help everyone regardless of age, especially because stuff like the infinite scroll is like one of the things that keeps people engaged and on a platform. And honestly, we've been struggling with our platform engagement on stuff like YouTube. We sometimes use whole days and like something that is supposed to be like, oh, just a little bit of procrastination becomes, oh shit, I just used up my whole day on YouTube. Twitter having an infinite scroll also does that. I actually have have a plugin that disables the Twitter algorithm so that I'm not like super targeted and so less stuff is buried. Make this the default for minors. Offer all users tools to limit their platform usage. Because social media is addictive. It is. We should have protections against these things. Revenue maximizing design features refers to optimization that relate more to revenue and usage. Time spent optimization, infinite scroll, autoplay. This is for the well-being or experience of users. Minors refers to any user who a platform reasonably believes to be under 18. Identification of minors should be proportional to potential risk and should be done in privacy-safe ways. Device-based parental controls as described in number 8. Ah, I see. So that's one of the workarounds. If you're using a device that already has parental controls on it, it might interface with that. That might be interesting. Enable greater user control and agency. Protect children who are especially vulnerable to design features that target impulsive choices. Impulsive choices! Still thinking of all the disabled people who could also use that support. 5. Provide transparent, sensible rate limits for new, untrusted users who access functionality that could be used to target or influence others. So some sites do let you know that someone's new. Like on Discord, if you made your account in like the last month, I think, maybe longer, there's a little sprout next to your name, and people know that you're a new user. So that's like a higher chance that you may be like a bad actor, someone trying to infiltrate things. Obviously not always. Something like Final Fantasy XIV has that same thingy, where if you're a new player, you have a little sprout, and I think that there's like a different kind of sprout for someone who is like a returning player, but they were still really new when they started. And that helps like community building and lets people know, oh, maybe I should help this player. They may not know everything that they need to know, or they might struggle with things, But I think Blue Sky sort of does it. Like with the invites thing, you have to be on the site for a certain amount of time to get any invites, for example. But it wouldn't be applicable to a lot of social media sites because not every place is like Blue Sky where you need to get like a code to actually be able to get an account. We have an extension that disables recommended videos on desktop, so basically we only interact with videos through our subscriber page. But I still look at recommended videos on mobile. Ah, I see. We should think about getting something that controls that a little bit. That'll probably have us go down rabbit holes a lot less. Rate limits for... Wait, I should drink water. Rate limits for functionality that can be used to target others refers to functionality that may be reasonable in small amounts, friend requests, messaging strangers, inviting others to groups/pages, viewing other people's profiles, commenting on public posts, but which create systemic risk when a small group of people use it a lot, to manipulate others, misuse other people's images, or solicit others for bad ends. Sensible refers to what most people would use in everyday usage. Transparent disclosure of these rate limits should provide accountability as to what limits conform to public expectations. I see. The one thing that I am a little bit worried about is people using those rate limits or like seeing how much someone uses something to bully someone about like if you're like online a lot. Because if you're like especially disabled, if you have to stay at home a lot, especially like maybe work from home, maybe you're immunocompromised, then you're just gonna generally end up using the internet more. And that could get you flagged as someone who, could be a bad actor, but probably wouldn't be. It's just they use the internet a lot. Not everyone who uses the internet a ton is bad. Prevent bad actors from accessing information and potentially harming others. Improve robustness of information ecosystem. I do think this is these are all generally good so far, to be fair. Or I should say, to be clear. Oh, hey, Hano. Are you talking about like chronically online, the chronically online term? I dislike it. Also, what's KOSA? I was mentioning the chronically online. Um, I'm I'm not exactly neutral to it, but I do sometimes self-identify with it. I mean, it's better than terminally online. um, though both terms are used derogatorily a lot, to be fair, or self-flagellatorily. I hope you're doing okay today. KOSA is the Kids Online Safety Act, which is a bill that's went through the Senate and had some revisions. That there are a lot of folks that are worried that it could be used to basically target queer content and make it so adults can like surveil their children and make sure they don't have access to like queer resources, or just generally make queer content harder for general people to access, because like it has Republican and Democratic support, but the Republicans have been pretty loud about the fact that they want to use it to limit kids' access to transgender things, because a kid learns about the fact that trans people exist in school, and then they go to a YouTube video and learn about transition, and then they want to be trans out of nowhere. We need to prevent this. So there's some other issues, but that's one of the biggest issues with it. It's gonna have a big splash online and what content looks like online and how adult content online is handled by platforms, because it'll push them to put in tools to regulate and moderate things that may not be in the best interest of all users, even though it's supposed to help kids, even though it might honestly hurt queer kids, and even limit access to resources about mental health stuff, because it also is supposed to like limit access to, or at the very least filter out, content about certain mental health things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and stuff, as an attempt to make it so those things affect young people less. But it's unclear if it might filter out helpful content for people struggling with those things, or people just talking openly and candidly about their experiences. Yeah, out of nowhere. Cis people irritate me so much sometimes. I remember that some people were like that when we came out. It's like, but I thought you were so happy being a boy. And it's like, just because I wasn't crying to you about it every day doesn't mean I wasn't struggling with my gender. It's like, you don't get to know everything about me. You don't get to know everything that happens in my brain. And also, it's not that safe to do so, especially when you're growing up. It is ridiculous what cishet and fucking abled and neurotypical people expect from minorities and white people. Back after a good amount of time. Welcome back, Bill. And hey, Sonny. And for folks coming in, make sure you read the trigger warnings, although I don't think we're going to run into them in a very explicit way anymore, because I'm almost done with the just chatting section. But we are talking about the Kids Online Safety Act and suppression of trans people, and the effect of suppressing trans content on, trans and queer mental health. So, keep that in mind. Right now, I'm reading a list of 9 principles that a programmer who has worked in moderation and disinformation sort of has proposed to make the internet safer for everyone, not just kids, but especially kids, that may or may not affect how KOSA has been or is being implemented. It hasn't fully... It's... I don't think it's been voted on the House floor yet, so it hasn't been implemented yet, even though it has bipartisan support. The leather barcode of conduct for open source communities must not be supported. What's the leather barcode? 7. Prohibit the public distribution of sexually explicit content depicting individuals who do not explicitly provide permission. Sexually explicit content clearly includes non-consensual nudity that can include any content that conforms to the standard legal definitions of sexual explicitness that do not require nudity. Broadly, if a private person considers something sexually explicit and non-consensual, any claim within reason should be honored. This is not meant to include historical or educational images that are not primarily sexual in nature. The permission should be proactive and explicit, such as a default should be that such content will not be publicly accessible unless a platform can verify consent was given in a clear manner by the person being portrayed. The one column that I haven't been reading, I am gonna read for this one because that makes this one more clear. Because I wasn't sure how to take this one because I feel like a bad faith interpretation of this particular goal could easily be you know that meme where it's like I consent, and then a third party's like I don't, and it's like it's not about you. Sexualized content has proven to be a persistent barrier to the full participation of women and vulnerable groups in online life. The growing capabilities of AI systems means that it is even easier to generate sexual content involving non-consenting individuals. Given the advances in facial identification, it could be possible for platforms to stop any non-consensual public distribution of sexualized content by limiting such distribution to individuals who proactively consented to have their sexualized images made public. So I feel like this would affect you know, when there's like a sex tape or like nudes of a famous, usually actress, goes viral, stuff like that. And of course, like revenge porn and stuff. Like that actually would be nice. Prevent non-consensual sexual imagery from distribution. But at the same time, the way that this is phrased makes me feel like, this is just vague enough that that maybe art would be under scrutiny as well, which I'm not sure how I feel about. And I'm thinking it's like, well, since companies are considered people in the United States, if a company doesn't like the fact that you're sexualizing a character that they have the rights for, would they be able to revoke consent and get it taken down, I wonder? Fucking hope not. Must not be stopped. Sorry. That's the thing, we were trying to make a thing. When you were talking last time about like a community you were making. I'm happy to keep up with this. I'm glad, Wamazi. I'm glad that not everyone was turned away from such a hard topic. There are some folks that were having some trouble, and I do understand a lot of this it can be triggering, and a lot of this is generally like, oh my god, this is so bad, like what can I do? And like the powers that be in government in general, especially in America, makes it so that we feel that we're powerless, that the only thing we can do to stop things is vote. And honestly, some of the first things that I came into information about this when I was first starting to look it up was literally stuff about, oh, KOSA is bad, you should call and send a letter to your senator and shit. And it's not as though those efforts don't have any effect, but it's such a fucking liberal mindset and I hate it, honestly. So I'm just kind of here like, I won't tell you explicitly what to do with this information, but I would urge you to see if your representatives or senators in your state support this bill, and maybe you can look online to see what resources you can use to convince them. We're dehydrated as fuck. I'm gonna drink water just for you. I recommend that you also drink water if you can, Sonny. As it gets colder, things get drier. Sort of. Well, not in my pants, but like skin cracks and stuff. Why are you pink? 'Cause color stuff. So whatever's on my screen actually shines on me. You know, 'cause, you know, the screen is like reflecting on my body. It's a cool little effect we implemented a little while ago. Number 8. Enable device-based parental controls for minors for any online activity that a broad group of parents considers risky. Device-based parental control can be done in a privacy-safe way by designing specific devices as belonging to minors, building on OS providers who experience linking permissions via Google and Apple family accounts. No identifying information about a user needs to be provided, nor does the user experience for non-designated devices need to change. Risky online activities would cover any online service that has been credibly connected to significant risk for minors, such that a broad group of parents across political divisions are seeking to mitigate that risk. That one, because of like the political divisions part, has me like, are they gonna agree though? Because Republicans were trying to get trans kids taken away from their parents not too long ago, so I don't know if they're gonna be able to agree on risky online activities. God knows I don't want to be a parent. That's so much. That's so much I don't want. Whew, dodge a bullet there. Protect children and empower parents. Incentivize conversations about digital literacy. Maybe they should teach digital literacy and media literacy in schools. I don't know why they would not do that. Weird. Send a letter, but then the building gets more shredders. You gotta start thinking with portals, honestly. Reminds me of how I saw a minor on Twitter reporting an artist, fiction purity shit, to the FBI, online tip form thing that they have. And I was just, hopefully the FBI don't actually press charges for false accusations since they're literally a child, but holy fuck. I have heard about that sort of thing happen to Hannah. Literally. I've heard like child exploitation advocacy organizations urging people to please stop fucking filling out the FBI's reporting form to report stuff that's like people drawing fictional characters. Like, I promise you, even if you're uncomfortable with lowly Shota stuff, I promise that it's not inherently child exploitation material, and you're really just wasting their resources that they have to verify that this is an unfounded claim. But that's not even the only thing that gets reported. I mean, shit, baby first shit does too. Or, you know, characters that are like just too cutesy. This is obviously targeted at children because only children like these rounded shapes. Ugh. And number 9. Publicly provide product experimentation results and the outcomes of social interest for any meaningful product design decision. I feel like companies aren't going to do that because they're going to be like, proprietary information. Product experimentation results refers to the data that companies collect to understand the experimental impact of their products. Design decisions refer to any meaningful product changes that potentially has societal or user impact. Outcomes of societal interest include, but are not limited to, measures of exposure to online harm, actions taken by users that indicate negative experiences, and surveys of user impact. The goal is to inform future design codes. I like the thought of companies being more transparent about their code and like the information they gather and like the results of those things. Like, it sucks that like companies like Facebook / Meta have to be audited or pressured by the government to like release information that will be like, oh yes, they're actually causing negative mental health outcomes with your algorithm. Whoa. It's like, that should be publicly available information, honestly. But for folks who came in while I was reading this, these are just some tenets that a person in the tech industry is proposing. These are not what's going to be implemented in KOSA specifically. It could be. What is a baby fur? What drizzle is? ABDL furry, I think. Yes, those two things. Smush it together and that's what you get. Ta-da! This was this morning on my art account, and I was like, unsupervised minors on the internet, in this case, is negative. I actually talking about, like, queer, especially queer minors being, like, Puritans online, that's a big thing, I think, is also being caused by lack of LGBTQ history in education and like kind of the advertiser friendly washing of queer media, and where it's like, oh, this thing is explicit, or this thing is in any way problematic, or reflects like something like taboo, must be bad. And they don't have anything else to like base their experiences off of other than people have told me this is bad, this isn't the right way to be queer, or whatever. Literally, and as a survivor, it's like, wow, I wish y'all gave me this much shit over. I wish you gave this much shit over real children. Honestly, though. And I mean, like, even beyond the puritanical stuff that we see in fandoms on Twitter and stuff, like even just like Republicans going, I guess we're doing this to protect children, but they really just want to police trans people and keep us in the closet for longer and shit. Is just like, you don't, even the abortion argument where it's like, yes, they're a perfect life at conception and you shouldn't murder them. And it's murder if you abort them. And then once kids are born and people can't take care of their kids because of economic insecurities, those same people are like, oh, I guess you're just a bad parent. Still kind of confused. Gonna look it up. Be right back. I see. I saw things. I guess I should explain more. You definitely saw things. ADBL, adult baby diaper lover, or I guess more generally, infantilization, is a kink / fandom that is centered about like youthfulness, it like re-experiencing childhood, reclaiming like childhood paraphernalia, things like that. And you combine that with furry, and it's like, I am a furry that pisses themselves. Well, that's actually a little basic. Because not all age players / ADBL / baby furs / littles like use diapers, for example. Some may be middles and like want to have a race car bed and play video games a lot, although a lot of people play video games a lot. And some people, you know, want light up shoes and stuff. I'm kind of all encompassing. I like middle stuff and little stuff. It doesn't have to be water sports, but you know, actually I know a lot of babs that don't like water sports technically. Like they consider water sports kind of different. Cause it's different being like, I'm pissing myself as opposed to I'm pissing on you. I mean, there's even a difference between like omarashi and water sports. Yeah, those are like separate things. Pierce Stars, hi. A lot of new time chatters today. Hope everyone's doing well. And if any of folks have questions about queer stuff, kink stuff, plurality, / DID stuff, shit, even some like PLC related stuff, I'm black, within reason, I'm happy to answer questions. We love educating people. It's like, it's okay to be queer, but don't have sets that accepting churches have. Quote, accepting churches have. Yeah, that's been a big thing in recent years. Though I do recognize that, especially within the ace community and folks that are less interested in sets just in general, there should be a space that's not hypersexualized, and some folks do feel ostracized in queer society because they have less interest in sets, or even less experience in sets. But that is no reason to like make people feel bad about their sexual experiences, the ways they use to cope, the way they explore fiction to like navigate any number of things, or just like want to express their sexuality. I mean, we support sluts in this chat. There's an effective way to cause a kid. There is an effective way to cause a kid trauma. Find a kid who talks about ADBL stuff and harass them off the internet. We know a surprising amount of adults who have gone through that. We know adult ADBLs have been like pushed off the internet and harassed and stuff. Honestly, though if you're like, from what I know from other adult friends who like knew and were practicing ADBL stuff, like when they were growing up, they were ridiculed by family who found out. Like, I am so happy. It's so weird to say the next sentence I'm about to say. I'm so happy I repressed because my parents would have not let me live it down. You know that comic where it's like, don't be your child's first bully? My parents would have definitely bullied the shit out of me. They've been like, you wear diapers? What the fuck? Get out of my house. They wouldn't say get out of my house. Honestly, it probably would have been the cigarette thing. It's like, oh, you like diapers? Well, we threw away all your underwear. Wait, sorry, I'm just turning that into ADBL fiction now. Fuck, forget that. Yeah, I think stuff like that is different from like human toilet stuff. Yeah. Just like vor is different from biting. Question, how do I explain to my parents that I'm non-binary? How much do you like your parents? Shit, that's not a great way to respond to that. Let's see. See, the thing with being non-binary is, and as a non-binary folk myself, I gotta say, a lot of people, especially cis people, aren't gonna understand it readily. So sometimes it's easier to like start slow. So say you're a non-binary person who would present in a way that is masculine. So someone who may have overlaps with like trans mask or trans man stuff. Just tell your parent, if you think your parents will accept transgender people, present them a binary trans identity first and see how they respond to that. And then based on that response, give it some time, let them get used to it, and then tell them about being non-binary. It's kind of like the reverse of like if someone was mono-gay, where it's like, tell your parents that you're bisexual first, and then they'll like get used to it, and then you go, actually, I just like one gender, and then they'll already have like kind of internalized your queerness, so it won't hit as hard. That's my thing. Also, depending on your reasonable assumption on how they might react, make sure you don't live with them. I don't know if you live with your parents or not. I know a lot of adults who live with their parents. No shame. However, when I came out to my living parent, they within 6 months they didn't talk to me anymore, and they still don't. Shit, I don't want them to. But they were supporting me financially up until that time and pulled away that support. And I know if I had lived with them, that they would have legit kicked me out. So even if your parents seem supportive, be ready for them. It sucks to say, but you have to be ready for not just like your parents, but other people in your life, some of your friends even, to not support you, and be ready to like make a distinction of who you want to keep, because there's going to be people who will abandon you, and that's bad enough, but there's going to be people who say they accept you, but then treat you like shit, and try to like undermine your identity. And it's important to recognize those people and cut them out of your life, or at least keep them at a distance, because like I understand that relationships are hard, and like when you have a history with a person, you want them to be good, right? You want them to respect you and stuff, and you want to like forgive them or give them space and time. And sometimes that can be valuable, and they could come later and actually be supportive, but you should also have some measures in place to protect yourself, I would say. As a kinky ace arrow spectrum person, I agree, which is why fiction is great. Yes! Agreed. I just hid as a kid, kept a Google Doc with all the links I wanted to explore, and kept until I was 18. I really like when minors respect those spaces. We have had people who come in here and be like, oh yeah, like I'm under 18. I was like, sorry, you gotta go. Come back when you're 18. And they come back when they turn 18. Wild. I love it when my space gets respected. I came out to my parents as gender fluid first, before I hit them with, JK, I'm only a boy. How did they respond to that? Oh, so he went, oh, you can still sometimes I can still sometimes have a daughter, and then later explain to my mom that I'm more MB. Oh, I see. That's actually a good idea. It got colder. Well, Mozzie, do you have a blankie? Try to make sure yourself is warm. And maybe get some lotion. I might need some lotion too. I don't want my lips to crack. My stepdad was like with it from day one, but my mom was confused. She came around though after a lot of conversation. Sometimes people are just confused. I do appreciate that happens. I will say I usually have to check myself when some of these questions get asked or these topics come up, because based on my experience and my trauma, like I want to just tell people like prepare for the worst. Just be prepared just in case, you know? Um and that's why I also put that addendum about like, it's valid to want to save space for people to maybe come around, and that's important and stuff. But like where I'm at right now, like I feel like I can connect with people more who don't have a really strong bond with their families, or at the very least don't necessarily live with them and feel like they need to please them. Um, and I mean that comes from like me only having access to a found family and my like bio family not being in the picture anymore. And I don't want everyone to conform to my like framework and stuff, but also like in terms of the relationships I've been able to like keep and maintain over the years. Thanks, Pierre Stars. Your future will be filled with happiness and sadness. Thanks for the follow. I hope it'll be filled with some good times too. Maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh right. We're talking about a lot of stuff, honestly. Um oh right, my like apprehension of like not a supportive family or less supportive family. I'm a little bit skeptical of cis family members who don't immediately accept their like trans or queer relatives, because I've seen a lot of homophobia and transphobia in those spaces, especially. And even though I didn't feel that it was right for me to save space for them, or I saved space for them for a certain amount of time, and then it was like, nah, it's not worth it. That's not the path for everyone, and sometimes someone can have a redemption arc. I Part of our whole brand is redemption arcs are possible. If you've hurt people or you've been abusive, you don't have to be. You can become better. You can grow. We did. At least we like to think so. Me and my mom have had a lot of conversations about gender. Oh, see you, Pierre Stars. Bye-bye. I ran to her, but also occasionally give her updates on my gender experience. That sounds amazing. Gosh. We logged into another Headman account. This is Nova. Oh, I see. Well, enjoy school. Diapers feel like a safe, feeling safer. Oh yeah. Honestly, when we first accepted diapers in our life as our Lord and Savior, we were just like, damn, I feel home. Like, literally. Yeah, well, I came out right before I was leaving for school. Like in the morning one day, it's like, hey mom, I'm trans, bye! Running with the toast in your mouth. I was prepared, but I knew they'd be okay with whatever. I still love me, but accepting and supportive of trans stuff was like, Having Asian family is like, I gotta be resilient. Like, I'm gonna force y'all to accept me because I'm stuck with y'all till we die. I see. Very tight-knit. Okay, so we read about the 9 principles. So now we have the background of what those 9 principles in design code for like privacy and autonomy for people online, especially minors, is. So now we can continue with this. Let's talk a little bit about the process that you came to. You mentioned various experts were involved in putting this together. How did some of the existing legislation that's out there, maybe the Children's Code in the UK or the Age Appropriate Design Code in California, how did it stack up against some of the ideas you have here? How is it the same? How is it different? So I think it was informed by many of the successes of that legislation. So in the UK, as a result of age-appropriate design code, things like infinite scroll, autoplay, these things are not less prominent in many products that children interact with. Those are successes that we wanted to enshrine, and they reflect things that were done at platforms to make things more safe and responsible elections. A lot of things you do to help kids are also things that you would do to prevent harm in an election setting. Wow. It's almost like kids are a canary in the coal mine. The things you do to protect the journalists are oftentimes the same things you do to protect kids from being harassed by large groups of people. So yeah, it definitely built upon some of those successes there. It also tried to address some of the criticisms that you've seen online, where people have talked about the ways that people estimate age can be a privacy concern, right? Nobody, I think, wants people to be checking IDs to access content online. Yes, that has been my main fucking concern. Not necessarily with KOSA specifically, because I've had this concern for a while. I mean, I've mentioned it before that there are certain Discord servers that do this. We have friends that do that for their Discord servers, but I just feel this just a tad bit too invasive, honestly. But I try to keep informed, and if I have an inclination that someone's a minor in my community, out you go. And I think that many conversations trying to come to things that many people could agree about. Nobody really cares if just Ravi says, like, these things are things we should do. Like, I think we all agree that there's a problem in the world. We'd all like to fix it. And, like, what's a solution that we can all get behind? And so we did. We talked to many people, and the lowest common denominator for protecting kids was not age estimation, but it was device-based control. So effectively, if I buy my kid a child's phone, people don't need to know apps that they're interacting with. That phone don't need to know anything about the kid other than they're using a kid's phone, right? So there's no change in the user experience for adults. There's no additional data being collected for kids. And I think that there's a very well-meaning people who might want to go farther than that. And that's a conversation that people can have, but this is at least a step that many people could get behind that doesn't have some of the same issues that more aggressive steps have had. I think that actually having a phone specifically for minors actually makes sense. And I'm sure capitalists will love it. Ugh. Yeah, I guess there's some legislation out there that seems like it's more aimed at maximizing parental control than it is that really necessarily maximizing child safety, or at least that there's a sense that you have when you look at some of the bills in places like Arkansas or Utah. Yeah, I think there's well-meaning people debating these issues. I think there's still a lower-hanging fruit. We haven't had a lot of people from free speech groups sign the code yet, but we've had input from a lot of them, and they were able to be much more okay with the idea that, a parent buys a child phone and it has this functionality that anything about that would ban or restrict content globally for anyone who's under a certain age. So that's core to it. It's actually almost a device level intervention here, you're saying. Yeah, and it doesn't say, for example, like what age someone should have, or it's like up to the parent. Like you will, a parent buys a kid a phone. The phone indicates that is a child's phone. When the parent decides that the kid is ready for an adult phone, they can buy the kid an adult phone. And it goes away from I've taken hard questions from. Let's learn about how do you estimate age. And there's no good answers there, right? Although what I'm about to say is sort of in opposition to this idea, I do think that this core idea is actually pretty good. I've known people who were abused in certain ways that if this was like widely implemented, they would just never get an adult phone just so they could be monitored and controlled more. I can imagine that for people who, have adult kids who don't leave for college because they can't afford to, and people are being helicopter parents, or the religious fundamentalists who pull their kids out of public school because of gender ideology and are just like, yeah, I'm just gonna homeschool my kids for no particular reason. Hey, Majora, how's it going? Good morning, or perhaps afternoon? It's 2:30 now. I can't just keep saying good morning. I mean, I can. Why are there so many games on sale right now? Why is Twitch having a sale right now? That's homophobic. No, the Remnant 2 DLC came out. Fuck you. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the politics now. Nah, fuck that. I will find a way around it. I got classmates. I'll buy one off them. I mean, there's gonna be a workaround for everything, Dell, you know? There's no perfect implementation. And I think to try to find like a foolproof, like no way around it implementation would mean like a little bit totalitarian-y. I'm on my mobile because my laptop got tombstoned. Fuck, that blows chunks. I'm sorry that that's happened. I hope you can get it fixed or something. Gosh, losing a computer is like losing a friend. If I'm being honest, as a technologist, like, I have to admit that we're going to make mistakes. Hey, like I just said, there's no perfect implementation. I'm going to treat you like a child sometimes as an adult. I'm gonna I'm gonna treat you like a child sometimes as an adult is such a statement for me. Okay, let's keep reading. Sorry. I'm gonna treat your child like an adult sometimes because it's an estimate. It's gonna be imperfect. Gosh. Yo, I can imagine someone in like a fucking little caregiver relationship. Someone who's a caregiver getting their little fucking child phone and putting child locks on it. We used to have partners that teased us about maybe putting parental controls on our fucking PlayStation. We cried. Gotta go, going to sleep now. Have fun sleeping. Hope it tastes like peanut butter. Good night. I'm gonna get a gaming laptop as a replacement. Badass. I have knives, Keyblade, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and brass knuckle saber in school. Dell, you were literally fucking Yusuke Urameshi in high school, weren't you? Or maybe Kuwabara. Probably Kuwabara. I think just having that certainty just gives people a lot more control. Remove some of the creepiness factor. And I think it's something that many people can get behind. I'm not saying that there aren't better solutions, there are more maximal out there. And I think it's just a low-hanging fruit that a large number of people would get behind. So the design code, everyone who signed the design code wants more that they have more things that they want. So it's not meant to be a thing that everyone wants, and that will be the silver bullet to fix the ecosystem. There's a set of common sense things that would fix a lot of problems of the ecosystem that a broad number of people could get behind that are based on best practices from a large amount of product work across companies. I want to ask you about Google's new proposal. So Google has also more recently put out what it calls a legislative framework to protect children and teens online. This is a relatively basic document. There's sort of 5 pages of goals that Google, the YouTube logo is here as well, put forward. Do you see any similarity in what they have done and what Google's put out? Do you think that company is learning from some other different types of proposals that civil society and groups like yours have put forward? Google or YouTube has done very similar work to the things I did at Meta. So like they're published best practices that Google has done where they've realized that optimizing for engagement is not the best thing to do in all cases. And they do lots of user surveys to try to optimize for quality. Now, like Facebook, I doubt that they did it as aggressively as possible. I'm sure there's more to be done, and so I don't have the benefit of having that document in front of me. A lot of proposals by companies tend to be more vague, and I think a lot of times the devil's in the details, right? So it's like, okay, we shouldn't optimize for engagement. We should optimize for quality. But what exactly do you mean by engagement? What do you actually exactly mean by quality? We try in our document to spell out what we mean by all these terms, and some of these things are honestly. These are the active areas of research in the world, right? Like, so there's no established best practice for how do I measure user perceptions of quality, for example, but there are a lot of people at YouTube at Meta, at various companies, trying to figure out how they want to get what is quality content, not just content that'll keep me engaged. And there are people who realize that they would lead to better outcomes, both for our democracy and for our children. And so I've never seen any one of these efforts not produce a positive outcome. Now, there's different ways to do it, but you can produce more positive and less positive outcomes, and we need to iterate on all that. But all of those efforts will be an improvement. So I think as far as proposals from companies, I think the devil's in the details, and it's important for us as a society to have specifics so that we can hold them to account. Because otherwise, if it's too vague, it leads to many degrees of freedom for companies to somewhat conform, but not necessarily do it in a way that really materially improves the user experience. So I'm hopeful that by making something that comes from outside the company, we can put a little bit more teeth into it and hopefully make something that can hold them to account. I love how liberals just keep being like, yes, we need to hold these companies to account from an outside source, and it's just like, capitalism is the problem. Sorry, I don't mean to be so pessimistic, but also, I have no reason to not... Okay, I have one reason to not be pessimistic, but it's not a good reason. I had a friend make a functional crossbow out of pins or rubber bands in elementary school. I've seen that before. I've never done it, but I've definitely seen it done. I made a working knife out of straws for my art teacher once. Oh, you made a shank. You just made a shank. That's all it is. Wow, if only there was a government structure that could prevent company powers like that. Yeah, I know, right? Well, you can't imagine the end of capitalism without imagining the end of the world, right? There's only capitalism. There's no alternatives at all. Right? Right? Cries and gay. One of the things you call for, which you've mentioned, is the bad. Sorry, why bad? There's not even a word in there that would have anagram to that. One of the things you call for, which you've mentioned, is the idea that, when product developers make changes to a product and are making design decisions, particularly when it comes to children, they should be able to publicly provide experimentation results. They should be able to provide access for researchers to be able to scrutinize whether these were good decisions that they made or not. I, of course, have spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about researcher access and talking about needs for transparency, that sort of thing. Clearly, we need that. What do you say to folks, though, who look at the available evidence and disregard the harm? They don't think necessarily the case has been made. There's a strong connection between social media use and problems of mental health, particularly with children. Yeah, I think there's... So there's a way that people take a maximal view of social media as, I'm not sure, it's a complex system. I'm not necessarily willing to be as strong about that as some of my colleagues, but I actually don't think it matters. I think it's very clear that social media, that technology has negative effects for a large number of youth, and there are some things in the Facebook papers where one stat was 30% of teens with body image issues are harmed by Instagram. I remember that one. And then other people would say 35% were helped, right? So if you, on average, maybe there's a null effect. Maybe there's a slight positive effect. But the 30% that were harmed aren't actually affected by the 35% that were helped. It doesn't really matter to the 30% that were harmed that there's this other larger group that were helped. That is fair. It's almost trolley problem-esque. The point is that there is a large group of people who are harmed by some of these products, and these effects could be made better, and I think that that's undeniable. And it's as simple as things like there are children who are using their platform, and the platforms are optimized for time spent, and so they sleep less, and sleep is uncontroversially related to mental health outcomes. So there's a lot of these uncontroversial things that are built into these products. No one would say that bullying and harassment is not related to mental health, right? No one will make that argument. You'd be surprised. I'm sorry, sir. You are naive. Just that people will lie and people will ignore people's mental health outcomes. Literally, a Republican will use use a paper that argues against his point and just assume that you won't actually read it and use it as circumstantial evidence to support his point. Gosh. Fucking Christ. So if there are parts of the product that lead to design decisions that platforms are making that lead to more experiences of bullying and harassment amongst youth, it doesn't really matter if it's causing the entire mental health crisis. If they're making design decisions that lead to more bullying and harassment, those decisions should be unmade. Whoa, such a radical decision. Wow, if only there was a... Wait, read that. Capitalism, wishing capital a very collapse mood. Something funny I told my BF is something that's funny about Trump supporters is that they're super religious, but in the Bible says there will be a false prophet and his followers will wear his mark on their heads. Wow. I was raised Christian, but I forgot about that, honestly. The Bible and The Simpsons predicting shit. Mood. Scroll back up, because Wamazi said diapers are to wear and sometimes to pee in. I just felt like everyone needed to know that. Gosh, I'm gonna need a change soon, speaking of that. It sort of seems like to me that part of what we're saying with these design codes for children is we want to strip out the hyper-capitalist. Yes, finally, you said it. I hate that they specify the hyper-capitalism because since this is the first time they mention it, it almost makes me feel like they're like, no, we don't want hyper-capitalist stuff. We just want normal capitalism stuff. Anyway, let me actually finish their statement before I try to rip it to shreds. It sort of seems like to me that part of what we are saying with these design codes for children is we want to strip out the hyper-capitalist motivations that platforms have generally and protect children from that. Protect them from the profit maximization, the attention maximization, almost like you would rather see if children are going to engage with these things that is done perhaps not at a loss, but certainly not with the goal of growing the business. I don't know. I think adults sensitive to marketing employees also deserve that protection, but you know, what do I know? I think I actually might be slightly more conservative than that, motherfucker. So the analogy I sometimes use is the building codes, and so we don't hold builders responsible for every bad thing that happens in the building, and I don't think we should hold social media companies responsible for every bad thing that happens online. I'm assuming you mean everything that happens on their website, because of course you wouldn't blame Facebook for what happens on Twitter, right? Right? It feels like a sort of slanted parallel to make. But I would say that a lot of stuff can be blamed on the people who own and should be moderating the service, the platform. The whole reason that the Trevor Project left X was because the moderation tools were shit. And it's like, okay, you can't blame every bad actor on Twitter for, you know, like LGBTQ harassment. But at the same time, it's not like it doesn't have a source. Oh yeah. That's been a meme for a while. The angels look like eldritch horrors. Biblically accurate angels? Terrifying. Too many eyes, honestly. But if a builder designs a building with flammable materials, we hold them responsible. So the analogy there does not disallow builders from turning a profit from building great buildings, from competing with other buildings to be the best builder possible. It just sets minimum standards so there isn't a race to the bottom, or builders are not out competing other builders by building things with cheaper materials. So things like engagement optimization for kids, in my opinion, are the equivalent of cheaper materials. They're cheap ways to outcompete competitors. I don't think they're really outcompeting competitors in the sense that most social media sites are doing it, though. They've already raced to the bottom. Bottoms. I think that many executives, if you ask them if they were truly honest, would say no. They don't want to be doing that. Like, they could get everyone to agree that this is a bad idea. They will all agree that this is a bad idea, and they'd all rather compete in some other way. So it's just trying to create a set of minimum standards. I'm not saying that platforms can't be profitable or outcompete other platforms. I'm just trying to say, let's not have a race to the bottom on the backs of the most vulnerable users. Have you had any discussions with lawmakers about this code? Okay, I am curious about this part. So, we just released it recently, so we haven't had time to socialize it as much as we could. We've certainly talked to people who are influential in the space. Some of the people who've signed the code are Francis Hu, John Haidt, Center for Humane Technology, New Public, many academics. Search for common ground, people who talk to government at various levels and talk to platforms at various levels. And so they're certainly involved in policy conversations, if not necessarily policy making. The part of the goal of the code was also to just not talk about policy solutions, but also talk about just these are just the best practices, right? And so people are just I've talked with are people building smaller platform startups, things that haven't even launched yet. And just saying, like, here's some things you can do to differentiate yourself from the other platforms, and so you might want to do these things voluntarily. And maybe they'll create better user experiences that will lead people to want to use your platform more than some of the incumbent players. So there's a lot of different ways that we envision it being used, not just by policymakers, but certainly yes, policymakers are one big constituency that we're hoping if we can put these ideas out there, it can give them some very specific ideas for how not to just say a broad principle that we want platforms to achieve, but also a more specific product choice that they want them to make. You just mentioned that you haven't had a lot of input yet from the free speech crowd. As it were, I suppose maybe legal experts who study the First Amendment here or who think about free expansion and various tests to look at the degree to which free expression is being upheld or otherwise impeded. Is that the part of your roadmap here? Do you intend to battle test this against the types of First Amendment complaints that seem to be bogged down prior legislative efforts, certainly around design codes for kids? Yeah, 100%. We haven't had a lot of people sign the code from those places, but we have taken input from places, and it's just when you ask an organization or a person at such an organization to sign such a thing, it's just a higher bar. So it just takes a while. We definitely hope to get people who are more free speech oriented to sign some of these things. There's one reason why we don't say that these things are what we think are pure policy proposals. Like, these are things that we think are best practices. There are ways that governments could support this in the same way the governments put out nutrition standards and say it's good if we all eat more vegetables. That's a bad example. That's a bad example. Literally, the fucking food industry used the guise of educating kids about like the food groups to push fatty foods and like unhealthy stuff, and saying it needs to be at the top of the pyramid. I know the food pyramid has been like reformatted, but it did damage for years. So much propagandizing. That's a bad example, dude. First time I saw a biblically accurate angel, I knew why. The first thing they say to someone is, be not afraid. Because the natural reaction to something like that is fear. Yeah, I get it. Gonna go now, but thank you for the stream, Drizzle. For sure, Colorful. Have a great day. You can't see me waving, but I swear I am. It's good for school lunches. School lunches? And it's good for school lunches that we serve certain things like that as an effect on like local schools. For example, they try to follow these things. So I think that there are ways that governments can enact some of these things in ways that free speech advocates could. They can. Government can support these things in ways that free speech advocates could actually stomach just by saying like, these are good practices. These are things that we think people should do. These are things we recommend. These are things like private company schools, places that that want to follow best practices can enact. These are things that app stores could decide to do in the service of their users. These are things that will be completely ignored by most of the tech industry. Sorry that he didn't say that. These are things that new players in the field ought to do. And so I don't think that it has to be something that free speech advocates necessarily have a big problem with, and that was a goal of this effort was really to create something that a broad group of people could go to companies and say, look, these are the best practices. And the companies are literally going to turn and say, but does it make me more money? Or are you forcing me to do this? Because the government isn't like casting a long shadow on these companies. They're not going to do it. Mitchie funked our lunch up. Now all the served is bread-based shit, and none of it filling. Mishy? What's a mishy? I would say public schools are notorious for having not very good like nutritional food, or food with little nutritional value. Oh, Obama. Oh yeah. I mean, it's so fucked up the Republicans also argue against free lunch. Fucking Christ. I'm speaking to you just a couple of days after 36 attorney general from across the United States sued Meta in particular, your former employer, around what they say allegedly it lured kids into Facebook and Instagram, that it insinuated various product changes that put kids at risk. Did you read that lawsuit? Do you consider whether your design code might have protected the company from the type of claims that are being made against it today? So I haven't read the lawsuit directly, but I'm familiar with many of the arguments in the lawsuit, and many of the arguments are not necessarily new. They focus on, yes, many of the things that are in the design code, and so things like not optimizing for engagement, or asking users what they want instead of thinking what users engage with is what they want. Not having features like infinite scroll, out of play, autoplay. Infinite scroll and autoplay. There are things like that. They recur like people all observe the same problems. And so I'm not surprised that the lawsuit nods to many of the same concerns that our design code happens to address some of these same concerns as well. It's like building codes around the world all rhyme, and it's not because people's coordinating, it's just because physics is the same all around the world. Like what creates a fire, what is flammable material is the same around the world. So we're all observing the engagements. Base optimization has harmful effects, and it's certainly not appropriate for our children. And so I think the lawsuit and our design codes are all just a function of that observation. You mentioned the United Kingdom earlier. There's the age-appropriate design code in the UK. A lot of critics of age-appropriate design codes in the US sort of paint a very dire picture of what will happen to the internet. In fact, some ideas like this are put into law. Have you looked closely into the UK, and have they had positive effects? Of course, you mentioned already that certain changes have been made, and I don't know. It seems to me, I'm not hearing this sort of fervor from the UK that the internet's been ruined over there. Yeah, the effects that I've seen from age-appropriate design code, things like some platforms not doing those engagement maximization features, have been positive. And I think part of the problem we have in the United States is we're so polarized that we can see people using a thing to achieve ends that are things that we wouldn't support in a way that you won't see in other places. I don't know enough about UK politics to know for sure, but it seems unlikely that other places around the world are as polarized as we are, and you have to have attorney generals who have like completely opposite views about the kinds of things that children should and should not see, and therefore they're going to use it for very almost nakedly political ends to pursue that agenda. It's almost a symptom, in my opinion. I did a lot when I was at Meta. I remember reading Ben Sassy's book, and it echoed a lot of things I had been hearing, where he was saying how politicians sometimes try to escape those cycles, but they, at the end of the day, they often end up leaning into like, well, the platforms on social media, which is the most outrageous thing. And so I think in a world where that's true, I don't think Americans trust their attorney generals to necessarily do the right thing, because yeah, of course there are many great attorney generals as well, but I'm just across the country. Like, could one attorney general take a vague law and abuse it in a way that wouldn't happen in the UK? Yeah, I think there's something that a lot of people are rightfully concerned about, and so I think that there's a reason why the age-appropriate design code might work well in the UK, and it may not work as well in the United States. Okay, we're almost at the end. I would feel weird not finishing. The government lets companies get a bunch of messed up shit. Yeah, companies have more rights than individuals, honestly. What are you working on next over there? Well, we're continuing to push the design codes. We've gotten a lot of support already, but it's not a simple 20-word statement. It is a complex document, and so there's going to be a lot of hand-to-hand combat. What the fuck? I know it's just like a metaphor, but fucking Christ, that came out of nowhere. It is a complex document, so there's going to be a lot of hand-to-hand combat. So we're presenting it to groups of people, and we're willing to show where people are who are influential and interested in these codes and explain to them why. They're beneficial and also take feedback on things that we can adjust our framing of. So we're just continuing to push on that. We also have probably the other interesting thing we're doing in a measurement effort. So the other best practices we had at company, a lot of design could focus on the user experience. They're not framed in terms of policy definitions of what is or is not harmful. They're framed in other definitions of what is a good or bad experience. A lot of the most important progress we made at Meta was when we framed things in terms of the user experience. So we also have an effort to measure the user experience across platforms where we're trying to see if Elon Musk making Twitter better or worse. Worse. He's making it worse. It's worse across the board. I don't know whatever. Welcome back. Nice to see you. If TikTok is actually becoming more polarizing as U.S.-China tensions, how will we know? Right. And so we can rely on anecdotes where people say like, yeah, my experience was good, my experience was bad, or we can measure them more systematically. So we can see that as a comment, is that a complaint or the design code? Like, we were hoping that we can get people to adopt these principles, and then we're hoping that we can actually give them credit for it when they do good things. And then we can actually see in the measurement efforts that the user experience is getting better. So I literally just read a transcript from a podcast. This is not an article. This is a thingy. I will, when we post the VOD, hopefully have all the links to all the stuff we read today on there. Well, I might also do it on Discord later. So if people want to look back at this or some of the other stuff that we mentioned, you can do your own research and, due diligence and stuff. Even though we're trying to be as transparent as possible, obviously, I have a bias. And even if people have similar biases, it is still valuable to sometimes do your own research, especially if you're really interested in a topic. And I promise you, just because you're an adult does not mean that this won't affect you. We have one more article. Much shorter, promise. I remember seeing a judge asking Mark Zuckerberg if he would be okay with him knowing where he stayed that night or what he ate that night and shit like that. And Mark said, no, sir, which is hilarious because he does that shit all the time to millions of people with Facebook. Yeah. Like, people who have, like, high positions at these social media companies can use that, the information from their position to spy on people. Shit, Elon Musk was literally unblocking himself from some people's feeds. He might have done it like in a mass, like a button push that like massively unblocked him from everyone's accounts, because a lot of people were like, I know I was blocking Elon Musk, I don't know what happened. So now we're at yesterday. This is the article that was a jumping off point for me and led me to pretty much all the stuff that I read today. Overcoming fear and frustration with the Kids Online Safety Act. John Perino is a policy analyst and Stanford Internet Observatory. Dr. Jennifer King is the Privacy and Data Policy Fellow at Stanford University Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. The Kids Online Safety Act has bipartisan support from nearly half the Senate and the enthusiastic backing of President Joe Biden. But opponents fear the bill could cause more harm than good for children and the internet. Last week, we heard new promises to bring KOSA and other bills addressing children's safety to a floor vote after a second Facebook whistleblower testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee with yet more details on how Meta leadership ignored evidence that Instagram was harming teens. The bill was updated and passed unanimously out of committee in late July, but civil liberties groups continue to raise concerns about privacy issues with age-based measures and duty of care requirements that can empower state attorney general to file lawsuits persecuting culture war issues such as content recommendations related to gender identity and abortion. For parents and youth advocates, there's an obvious and urgent need to regulate the design of social media and similar online platforms. Many young people and parents know someone who has struggled with social media use and want technology companies to be held accountable. Teens have a complicated relationship with social media, and parents are understandably concerned with declining youth mental health and well-being. One thing both sides in the battle over KOSA have in common: fear and frustration that it might not be possible for Congress to pass any legislation on social media privacy or safety. Unfortunately, the fate of the legislation may come down to a fight that is rife in emotion, but lacking in nuance or a clear path forward. Critics cannot entirely dismiss KOSA, and advocates must recognize that online safety legislation requires a remarkably difficult Goldilocks balance to get the rules just right. Clear yet adaptable, protective but unobtrusive, all with empowerment and authority for children and parents that do not prevent access to online spaces or inhibit free expression. Advocacy is essential, but KOSA will not move forward without compromise. Some steps have been taken to address concerns, but more needs to be done. We need adults and young people in the room who are willing to find consensus and take action. What's in KOSA and recent changes? While the debate has focused on a few key components of KOSA, there are a lot more in the bill, and most of it is uncontroversial. Recent changes also lessen requirements of age verification in response to privacy concerns about the potential for parental abuse. The bill would set a duty of care to protect children under 17 on social media and similar online spaces, such as video games, virtual reality worlds, and online messaging or video chat spaces that connect strangers. The duty of care is specific to addressing mental health disorders, compulsive usage, sexual exploitation, the promotion of drugs or controlled substances, deceptive marketing, and violence, bullying, or harassment. The law will require that platforms provide safeguards for young users and strong default privacy protections, including the ability to limit who can contact them and to set time limits. Parental control tools could be required to manage privacy and account settings, view and restrict app usage, and restrict in-app purchases. Smaller services could utilize integrations with parental control settings on a user's device. The bill would set deadlines for responses for user reports of harm to children and require a reporting system accessible to parents, minors, and schools. Transparency and research measures would require companies to conduct safety audits and make more information available to the public and some academics. What if you just made it all available to the public? So regardless if you're an academic or not, you can see it. That'd be nice. KOSA would spur government research on age verification measures, set rules for research conducted by social media companies on young users, and create a Kids Online Safety Council with diverse representation from government, civil society, and academia. KOSA would also restrict targeted advertising for young users. Most measurements would apply to social platforms regardless of revenue or user numbers. This wide scope is targeted at small but significant platforms for teen users to facilitate anonymous interactions or connections with strangers. Think back to the El Mogul lawsuit. It also is meant to ensure that online social spaces and virtual worlds or video games popular with teens are covered. KOSA does not cover text messaging, email, online video or audio calls, blogs, or other spaces without content or real-time interaction with strangers. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and State Attorney General have authority to enforce most of the requirements of the bill. Is an email a thing without content? I don't know. It feels weird, that wording. Recent changes in the July markup. The bill was updated and passed unanimously out of committee in late July with a few noteworthy changes. Compliance with age-based restrictions now uses an objective knowledge standard, which means that companies would not need to take new measures to obtain the age of users. This is an attempt to address privacy concerns with existing age verification techniques. Parental consent measures have been replaced with language requiring a parent's express affirmative acknowledgement for users under 13 to create social media accounts with safeguards and parental control settings. A research program on the effects of social media on youth, previously open to most independent researchers at nonprofit or academic institutions, would now be conducted by contracting the National Academics of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. The previous measure faced industry opposition and conservative pushback related to concerns about censorship, according to multiple sources familiar with the negotiations. The amended bill refers to a current National Academy Committee on the ascertainment of the impact of social media on the health and well-being of adolescents and children. Stanford Internet Observatory faculty director Jeff Hancock is a sorry, I can only be mature for so long at a time. Cock. Director John Hancock is a member of that committee, which is expected to release a report later this year. Major debates. Much of the concern with the bill comes from the reading between the lines, with fears about how the legislation would be enforced or used to advocate political agendas. Civil society and industry groups oppose the legislation due to concerns it will advance political culture wars. It will. They also raise fears about privacy, safety, and security risks in a future internet where age verification would be required to access information. Good point. Those debates are focused on the interpretation and enforcement of the duty of care provision, age-based restrictions, and potential abuse of parents' control requirements. Hyperbole abounds. There is a seed of truth in some concerns. This makes it difficult to sort fact from fiction about the bill. I don't think anything that was previously said will be fiction. I don't know if the government can really be trusted enough to, like, these things to not be abused. I don't think it's hyperbole. Even if certain things there are said to be negative outcomes of this bill happen, that doesn't mean that if not everything people claim will happen happens, that it was hyperbole. It just means it didn't happen. Hey, how's it going? I'm vocally angry, but I'm having a swell time. How are you, Lee? We're talking about KOSA and how it's gonna change the internet and how it might be used to police queer content online and also be used by parents to spy on their children and abuse them. Wow, I actually said that in, like, a clear and concise way. The duty of care in KOSA has a substantially more detailed and narrowly tailored set of requirements than past legislative attempts, but critics still argue the legislation would incentivize platforms to limit politically controversial content available to young users in violation of legal rights to free expression. This is the most important and difficult section of the bill to get right. A duty of care must find the right balance to address design without targeting content. If done successfully, a duty of care could hold social media companies accountable for compulsive usage and awful harms, such as sexual exploitation, while protecting First Amendment rights to include legal but controversial content about topics such as reproductive health or gender identity in teen users' feeds. The rules do not apply to search results and permit users to access information from clinical or other authoritative sources. This wording seeks to address that the duty of care could be used to restrict access to information about gender identity or reproductive health. At the same time, it inherently acknowledges that the duty of care is both about design and content. The bill gives state attorney general broad power to interpret harmful content and file suit against social media companies for failing to filter certain content from children. While access to clinical resources is protected under the bill's definition of a duty of care, it is clear that the state attorney general plans to file suit regardless. Interesting. State attorney general have political incentives to bring new lawsuits against big tech using KOSA to target transgender content and continue their legal war against big tech. The question is whether those opposed to the action are confident the duty of care is sufficiently narrow to ensure successful enforcement and the courts addresses real design harms. Supporters note that the duty of care is tailored to only cover specific harms facilitated by the design of many social media companies. The challenges lie where algorithmic recommendations push inappropriate or potentially harmful content. Oh boy, policing the internet again. Yeah, the internet keeps getting worse. Enjoy your lark pair. Meow. Hope you're doing well with whatever you're doing. The Heritage Foundation explicitly argued for the bill to be used to block content about transgender people in a tweet earlier this year. Oh, so they did it. Yeah, they did it more than once. It wasn't just that one representative who did that video interview. KOSA co-sponsor Senator Marsha Blackburn, that's the one, Republican senator, supported KOSA during a Family Policy Alliance event, following these comments by adding that the protecting minor children from transgender in this culture should be among the top priorities of conservative lawmakers. Her legislative director subsequently pushed back to the implication of comments that were intertwined, saying KOSA would not censor transgender content online. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from, what is it, Connecticut, also pushed back on claims in NBC reporting, saying challenges have been made to protect free speech. Striking the right balance between supporting safe spaces online and protecting against toxic content targeting LGBTQ youth is very important to us, which is why my staff and I had extensive and collaborative conversations with stakeholders, including LGBT groups, to further clarify the legislative text so that it better reflects the intent of the bill, Senator Blumenthal said. There's no technological silver bullet to solve this complicated challenge, and what might be harmful to one user can provide benefits for others, such as the personal stories about mental health or eating disorders. There are also constitutional and other legal protections for user-generated content and for platforms to have editorial control over moderation and recommendation systems. I think that's something that's good to point out. I mean, just like there are people who, when we first started talking about this, was like, I don't think it's good for me to like be here for this, either because it's triggering or something that they don't really want to engage in. But there are other people here who are like, oh, thanks for the stream, or wow, thanks for staying up to date on this, that sort of stuff. Like, some things hurt some people, don't hurt others. Whoa. Which actually, we talk about this sometimes, about how, like, when someone talks about, like, oh, it's okay to do this thing, or this behavior, this identity is okay, as long as you're not hurting anyone, and we kind of interrogate that, where it's like, how do you define hurt? Because depending on how you define hurt, then it doesn't, depending on how you define hurt, I think that even if you are hurting someone, that there can be an argument that you should still be able to do it and you still have that freedom. Because, like, for example, if you make art that is objectionable to some people, you draw stuff that is taboo and triggers people, that does hurt them if they see it or they interact with it. But people who may struggle with things related to that taboo might find some solace in it. And they might use it to connect with other people who have those same issues and, create a support system, for example. Or they might just simply feel seen. So, like, it depends on how you talk about harm. We'll talk about that till the cow comes home, honestly. I remember reading a story on Reddit where a woman said her kid's school was saying if they don't get access to her kid's social media, it will have an impact on his grades. They said that they were trying to find out who was bullying his friend and hurting herself and moving schools, but it was obvious they were trying to find a scapegoat for their incompetence. It be like that, though. It's easy to find a scapegoat. Way easier than changing your behavior, that's for sure. What good is a duty of care if it does not hold up to constitutional scrutiny under the First Amendment? This is important to get right, and there are new efforts to find consensus in recent months. Next steps for duty of care. Public pressure helps prioritize the efforts of those working inside technology companies to improve safety design measures and provide resources to improve the well-being of users. Ultimately, this advocacy combined with legislative and regulatory action should drive change, including solutions that many are already working on inside tech companies. Google and Meta have stated that their dedication to developing age-appropriate design measures for users. The legislative push should include engagement with those companies to find consensus on those measures. Last month, Google and YouTube released a legislative framework for youth online safety. The principles are promising and include an age-appropriate approach based on youth developmental stages, risk-based age assurance measures, balancing parental control options for autonomy for teens, safety for design measures, and a ban on personalized advertising for children and teens. The University of Southern California Neely Center also announced an important effort in October, releasing a design code for social media. That has to do with the interview that I previously read. Design code for social media outlining expert consensus on 9 actionable design changes that will improve social media's impact on society. Age verification and privacy. Contrary to some claims, KOSA does not ban kids from joining social media or require age verification. Most of the bill will only apply to users known to be under 17. There is no age verification process required in the legislation, and social media companies already have to comply with an objective knowledge standard to protect the privacy of children under 13 years of age. In addition to the change in legal wording, KOSA explicitly has a section that states that the bill does not require any additional data collection to determine the age of users or implementation of age verification or age gating measures. However, one could reasonably argue that the bill's requirement for a parent to provide affirmative acknowledgement before a child under 13 can create a social media account or use an online multiplayer game could effectively prevent a child from joining social media. KOSA will also task the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, to conduct a study on age verification, and will set specific requirements for the accounts of children under 17. This debate is not so much about what is in the bill, but about concerns with a future internet where identification and age gating measures are required to participate in online spaces and engage in free and open conversation. Yeah, I would hate for the few technical third spaces we have left through the internet to be destroyed. Kids are always gonna find ways to get around things. That was what Dell was saying too. It is true, and I know lots of people who did get around things as kids, even with parental locks. And I think that having some amount of protection is good, right? But I think I think there's too many bad actors that want to use it to police the culture and like make it so kids don't have, or even adults have less access to information that they would need. I'm talking about like trans rights and like trans visibility and resources about being trans, and even resources about mental health, the things that people, even teens, might struggle with. But this article and a few other ones have also mentioned reproductive rights, especially considering there are some states where it's not legal to get an abortion anymore, even if you are a victim of sexual assault. So like, I got some concerns. She said if they tried failing her son, she would sue the shit out of them, and they changed their tune real quick because they were a public school. I think my mom did something similar when I was growing up to make it so I didn't repeat a grade. Fucking Christ. Oh, Wikipedia is a great thingy. I guess Wikipedia is not technically a social media site, but you can have an account for it. I don't know. Maybe Wikipedia would be under scrutiny under KOSA. I'm not sure. It's kind of up to the Attorney General, honestly, which is what I'm scared of. However, the debate is often constrained by the assumption that users will have to hand over a form of government ID, particularly a driver's license in the U.S. context. That is an important concern, but there are verification options available to authenticate a user without exposing their identity or personal information. University of Northern California researcher Matt Purwatt and Scott Brennan published a comprehensive report about privacy trade-offs for age verification measures and policy, offering suggestions for regulators and policymakers. This I'm not gonna read this, but I'll add that to the works cited or whatever for when I post the VOD and whatever, because that might be really useful for additional research, because I'm still wondering what information that you already get from users could you use to verify their age. I'm at a loss. Public school is rough because you're either at the mercy of terrible parents or terrible board members. Mood. Most of my life I was at a regular public school, but then from 6th grade to 12th grade I was at a charter school, which was better for a time, and then funding got shitty because they were trying to spread their brand across the city and like get more schools, and so the money that they had that they used to only focus on like 400 kids started serving like over 1,000, and like the quality of a lot of stuff went down, and a lot of teachers were like didn't have secure jobs, and a lot of people left after like 1 year and stuff. It was terrible. Charter schools are bad, actually. Just fund public schools, please. Device level techniques offer a path forward for age assurance and parental controls, along with programs like European Union's Personal Digital Wallet Initiative, which does not expose the identity of a user in an authentication process. The USC Neely Center's Consensus Design Code recommends that the best. Oh right, the like child phone stuff, and like when you buy a phone, it having something to say that it's a child's phone, so that when it integrates with like their Google account or like to get on YouTube, or when they make a account for Twitter or something, that the site immediately knows that this person is should be protected or whatever. The USC Neely Center's Consensus Design Code recommends that the best privacy-protecting method of age verification is at the device level, providing technical indicators if the owner is under a certain age without identifying the user. University of Michigan professor Jenny Radesky? That's a cool name. First cool name I've read all day. In these articles. Chat doesn't count. You're all cool. Jenny Radesky, a leading researcher on children's device usage, has long advocated this approach with a focus on quality of time spent over limiting children's access to devices. It is unclear how parental agreement and access to parental controls would work, but the legislation seems to draw from current measures required under the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule, COPPA, for children under 13 to obtain verifiable consent from an adult. Many parents already use these tools, with the research findings by Microsoft earlier this year finding that 81% of parents report already using at least one safety tool for their children. Whoa. This is again an area of nuanced debate for safety controls, but where concerns appear to be tied to the future of the internet, where parents have more control over their children's devices and online experiences, especially for younger children. What's next? Kids stopped bullying me when I kicked the biggest bully in the Nats for taking my pizza when I was in middle school. Nice! Boss destroyed. Or maybe like more like invader vanquished. What's next? KOSA still faces many hurdles. Despite unanimous passage out of committee and nearly 50 co-sponsors in the Senate, significant revisions will likely be needed to get it passed that will take time, which Congress simply does not have this year. Yeah, the year's almost over. Debate on KOSA is taking place amid a global regulatory movement for online safety rules. The United Kingdom's Online Safety Act was signed into law earlier this year, and the European Union's Digital Services Act is now being enforced for the largest social media companies. The Global Online Safety Regulators Network launched in November 2022 with 6 member countries and 4 observers, spanning from Australia to South Africa and Ireland. Where there is a growing number of laws passed by state lawmakers across the U.S., KOSA does not have a clear path forward, with continued opposition in a political climate that requires near unanimous agreement to legislate. In some ways, this feels like deja vu. Legal hiccups with online safety regulations date back to at least the Communications Decency Act of 1996. The law was almost entirely struck down due to constitutional free expression issues. Only Section 230 remains, which has become a key pillar to internet law and policy. Which was what the Amoogle thingy was about, if you remember. It all's related. I promised it would come full circle. I'm smart sometimes. This year, KOSA passed out of committee on the same date in July as it did last year. It's worth recalling that KOSA came out of a series of Senate hearings, including one in which Facebook whistleblower Francis Haugen. Now there's a new Facebook whistleblower, Arturo Benjar, who testified at a Senate hearing aimed at giving new wind to the bill last Tuesday. KOSA supporters hope this testimony gives the bill a final push to secure more than 50 co-sponsors in the Senate. Bajir, a former Facebook safety engineering director, testified that Instagram has concrete research on harms to children and teens, but reportedly fails to take action. Almost like when petroleum companies knew that climate change was gonna happen and would get worse and didn't tell anyone. Weird that. It's almost like there's a system that incentivizes they lie for profit. Weird. In the Wall Street Journal reporting last week, Bajir described how his daughter stopped reporting sexual harassment and inappropriate comments on Instagram because the company rarely responded or took action. In fact, the Wall Street Journal investigation found that Meta added steps to the reporting process, making it more difficult to submit a report. The company claims that new steps were added to reduce frivolous reporting. If passed, KOSA will require companies to respond to harmful interactions that children experience on platforms within 1 to 3 weeks. I guess Twitter will have to hire a whole new moderation team then. While Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat in New York, has said children's online safety and privacy legislation are his top priorities, Senator floor time is extremely limited with a backlog of spending bills and nominations and urgent geopolitical crises. And KOSA lacks companion legislation in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where members have prioritized comprehensive federal private legislation to address children's online safety issues. Even that priority legislation has yet to be reintroduced in the current Congress. These political obstacles mean that most likely the path to passage is still through the annual federal spending bill this year, where a single powerful senator or congressional bloc can strip out so-called rider legislation. I think that's referring to like things that are added to a bill at the last minute to get it past like criticism. I put my nails through handheld pencil sharpeners so that I can have blade nails and use grapple tactics. Del, you're a nerd. Fucking Christ. That's a good idea though. I'm glad you didn't fucking cut your fingers, though. Sorry, that's a bad idea. While there is now an end-of-year push, the legislation may have a better chance of moving in the lame duck session following the presidential election next year. However, a single senator could still uphold the process of bringing the bill to the Senate floor at any point. The same challenges remain with tucking KOSA inside must-pass legislation. I wouldn't be surprised if next year it leads to like a fucking like a government stall. That would be unsurprising to me. It's not to say that political obstacles will prevent anything from being done in DC to protect the abuse of children online. We remain optimistic that the efforts of parents and advocates will not go to waste. For instance, the Biden administration is currently working on voluntary guidance, policy recommendations, and a toolkit on safety, health, and privacy by design for industry developing digital products and services. These measurements are expected to be released by an Integrity Task Force on Kids Online Health and Safety in spring 2024. The FTC also has important authority. Commissioners are planning to hire child psychologists by fall 2024, and the FTC complaint brought by the children's safety advocacy group Fair Play could spark the investigation of a service that enables the anonymous harassment of teens and falsely promises clues about who is bullying them for a fee. Oh, fucking capitalism, I swear to fucking Christ. State Attorney General and school districts are also taking legal action against social media companies alleging privacy abuses and deceptive design that harms children. Recommendations. KOSA marks an important beginning for safety by design policy that attempts to give users more control over their online experiences and requires companies to take proactive safety measures, conduct internal tests, and provide more transparency about those efforts and how their design works. To move forward, it is necessary to more narrowly define the problems the bill is trying to address. Congress should focus on the core, less discussed parts of the legislation, in particular efforts to address child sexual exploitation and abuse, and to encourage design that gives more users more control of the experiences with online messaging and algorithmically powered content feeds should be emphasized. There are uncontroversial measures that could save lives. They are achievable and are already being implemented in policy around the world, but just not in America. While the Kids Online Safety Act does not yet hit the mark, it should not be dismissed out of hand. Policymakers, advocates, academics, and industry must work together in good faith to pass legislation that protects against the worst harms children face online, and to establish a legally protective duty of care to empower children and parents to take back control of their online experiences. This piece has been updated to clarify which provisions of KOSA apply to children and which to teens. Good to know. So, yeah, that was us talking about KOSA and how it might affect the internet and privacy, age verification, how it might be used to harm trans people, and how it could be used to police minors by abusive parents. We don't have that much time left this year. Our last stream is on Christmas. If there is a substantial update to this situation before then, we will return to this topic. Otherwise, probably next summer. Yeah. This is all really, really scary for sure. And even with my radical politics, I do feel like the some of KOSA is necessary, but I don't have enough faith in our leaders to implement it in a way that won't hurt more people than it helps. I invite you to do your own research, and if you are concerned enough that you want to take action, find some advocacy groups. Like see if you can organize some things. I mean, I'm sure like protests in general might help. When I first ran to some of this information, it was alongside stuff like, oh, call your senator, which I don't think is going to be very useful personally, but I definitely won't say don't do anything. I'm certainly not someone who advocates for lay down and rot, you know? But that's just me. Whew. Thank you for your time, and please take care of yourselves.